She replaced me in a week, 7 days, and I've replayed that number in my head more times than I'd like to admit. Because when something you invested months, maybe years, into gets swapped out in 7 days, it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes you. It makes you question your perception, it makes you question your value, it makes you question whether what you had was ever real in the first place. I keep thinking about how we ended the conversations, the tone, the way she said she needed time, the way she said she had to focus on herself, and then a week later there's someone else standing where I used to stand. So what was the truth? Was she grieving while I was still loving? Was she detaching while I was trying? Was I the only one still emotionally present toward the end? Because you don't replace someone in a week unless you were already halfway gone. That's the part that keeps echoing in my mind. You don't wake up on Monday heartbroken and by Sunday decide you're ready for someone new. That's not healing, that's transition. And if she transitioned that smoothly, that quickly, then maybe I wasn't as permanent in her world as she was in mine. And that realization stings more than the breakup itself, because breakups hurt. But being replaced fast, that attacks your identity. It makes you feel temporary. It makes you feel interchangeable. It makes you feel like you were just holding a spot until something better came along. And I hate that my mind even goes there. But when someone replaces you in a week, you start asking dangerous questions. Was I not enough? Was I boring? Was I too available? Did she already have him lined up? Was I just comfortable, not essential? And the scary part is, your brain doesn't just ask those questions, it starts believing them. You start comparing yourself to someone you don't even know. You start imagining that he must have something you didn't. More excitement, more dominance, more money, more mystery, more something. And now it feels like you lost a competition you didn't even know you were in. But love was never supposed to be competitive. It was supposed to be intentional, chosen, protected. And if she could swap me out in 7 days, then maybe what we had wasn't as protected as I thought. Maybe I was fighting for something that was already slipping away. Maybe I was loving someone who had already emotionally exited. And that's the part that hurts the most. Not that she found someone new, but that she found someone new that quickly, because that speed tells a story. And I'm still trying to figure out what that story says about me. I think what really messed with me wasn't just that she replaced me, it was how effortless it looked, how natural she made it seem. Like I was just a chapter she flipped past without rereading, because I'm still here sitting with it, still replaying the last conversations in my head, still wondering if I missed signs, still trying to understand where it actually started falling apart, and she's already smiling next to someone new. That kind of speed doesn't just hurt, it humiliates you. It makes you feel like you were the only one emotionally invested at the end. Like while you were trying to fix it, she was already detaching. Like while you were thinking, we just need time, she was thinking, I need someone else. And the scariest part, I don't know which version of reality is true. Was she already talking to him before we ended? Was I slowly being phased out while I was still trying to show up? Or did she just move on that fast because she can't be alone? Every scenario hurts in a different way. If she was already lining him up, then I was loving someone who was preparing my replacement. If she just needed validation that quickly, then I was never the emotional anchor I thought I was. And if she genuinely didn't feel anything after it ended, then maybe I meant less than I believed. That's what a 1-week replacement does to your mind. It makes you question the entire foundation. You start rewriting memories. That time she seemed distant, that time she picked a fight out of nowhere, that time she said she felt confused. Now they don't feel random anymore. Now they feel like early signs of an exit. And the worst part is realizing that you might have been the only one still emotionally inside the relationship toward the end, because you can't replace someone in a week unless you were already halfway gone. And that's the sentence that keeps echoing. Halfway gone. Maybe she left emotionally months ago. Maybe I was loving someone who had already checked out. Maybe the breakup wasn't the beginning of the end. Maybe it was just the announcement, and that realization shifts the pain, because now it's not just heartbreak, it's feeling blindsided, it's feeling like you were operating on outdated information, like you thought you were both building, but she was already packing. And I hate that this makes me question my value, because logically, I know someone moving on fast doesn't define me, but emotionally, it feels like it does. It feels like I was replaceable, interchangeable, temporary, and nobody wants to feel temporary in something they treated as permanent. I keep thinking about how deeply I committed, how I shut down distractions, how I defended her when people doubted us, how I chose her repeatedly. And now it feels like I was the only one guarding something she was willing to trade. That's what makes it feel unfair. Not that she moved on, but that she moved on like it was easy, like I was just space that needed to be filled. And that's the dangerous thought, because I wasn't just space, I was time, I was effort, I was loyalty, I was presence. And if she could replace all of that in 7 days, then either she never fully valued it, or she never fully processed it. And I don't know which one hurts more, because if she didn't value it, then I misjudged everything. And if she didn't process it, then she's just distracting herself. But distraction still feels like replacement when you're the one left behind. And I'm left here trying to rebuild confidence that got shaken by a 7-day timeline, trying to remind myself that speed doesn't equal significance, trying to remember that depth doesn't get erased overnight, because if what we had was real to me, then it was real, even if she replaced it quickly. But still, 7 days. That number doesn't just represent time, it represents how fast someone can move on when you thought you meant more. And I'm still trying to figure out what that says about her and what it doesn't say about me. The part nobody prepares you for is how fast replacement attacks your confidence, not just your feelings, your confidence, because heartbreak hurts your chest, but being replaced quickly hits your ego. And ego isn't pride, ego is identity. It's how you see yourself. And when someone moves on in a week, your brain starts filling in blanks you never wanted to think about. You start comparing yourself to someone you don't even know. What does he have that I don't? Is he more exciting, more unpredictable, more emotionally unavailable, more dominant, more detached? Did she need someone less steady, less serious, less invested? You start dissecting yourself like you were the problem to be solved. And that's dangerous, because now it's not just about her moving on, it's about you feeling like you lost to someone else, like this was a competition, like you were weighed against another option and didn't measure up. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about. If someone can replace you in a week, they didn't replace you. They replaced the role, they replaced the attention, they replaced the space, they replaced the feeling of not being alone. But connection, real connection, that doesn't get swapped that quickly. You can substitute company, you can substitute validation, but you can't duplicate depth overnight. And I have to keep reminding myself of that, because when you see them laughing together, posting together, looking comfortable together, your mind doesn't care about logic. It sees images and it translates them into meaning. They're happier. She upgraded. You weren't enough. But images don't show history. They don't show inside jokes. They don't show late night vulnerability. They don't show how deeply you invested. They show a moment, and moments are easy to manufacture. Depth takes time, and if she replaced me in 7 days, then either she had already emotionally left long before we officially ended, or she doesn't process loss the way I do. And both are hard to accept, because if she left emotionally before I did, then I was loving someone who was already gone. And if she doesn't process loss deeply, then I was loving someone who doesn't sit with pain. She escapes it. And escape looks like replacement when you're the one grieving. I won't lie though. Part of what hurts is feeling disposable. Like I was just a chapter. Like I was just a phase. Like I was someone she needed for that season. And once it was over, I was easy to move past. But here's what I'm starting to understand. People who move on that quickly aren't necessarily healed. They're avoiding, They're filling silence. They're covering discomfort because sitting alone after a breakup is uncomfortable. It forces reflection. It forces accountability. It forces grief. And not everyone has the emotional discipline to sit with that. Some people run straight into the next distraction, not because the previous person meant nothing, but because feeling nothing feels easier than feeling everything. And I need to remember that her timeline isn't a measurement of my worth. It's a reflection of her coping style. Still, that doesn't erase the sting, because I'm still here thinking about what we had. Still processing, still grieving, still reconstructing my confidence, and she's already building something new. That imbalance feels unfair, like I'm stuck in emotional traffic while she sped through the exit ramp, and maybe that's the hardest pill to swallow. Not that she found someone else, but that she found someone else while I'm still untangling myself from what we were. It makes you feel behind, like you're losing, like you're weaker for caring longer, but caring longer isn't weakness, it's depth, and depth doesn't reset in 7 days. So maybe the real truth is this: she replaced the position, but she didn't replace the impact. And if what we had was real to me, then it mattered, even if she chose not to sit in it, even if she chose speed over reflection, because I would rather be the one who feels deeply than the one who forgets quickly. 7 days might look like replacement, but sometimes it's just avoidance in disguise. And one day, when the distraction fades, she might finally sit with what I've been sitting with this whole time, and by then I'll be further ahead emotionally than she ever was, not because I moved on faster, but because I actually processed it. And that's something nobody can replace in a week. The worst part about her replacing me in a week isn't even the new guy, it's the silence that came with it, because when someone moves on that fast, they don't just leave you, they erase you. The calls stop, the inside jokes disappear, the routine you built together vanishes, and suddenly the person who used to know your schedule, your moods, your patterns is giving that attention to someone else. That's what makes it feel unreal, because it's not just that she found someone new, it's that she redirected everything so easily. The same energy, the same time, the same effort, just different face. And that's when your mind spirals into the dangerous place. If she can give someone else what she gave me that quickly, was it ever special? That question hits hard, because we don't just want to be loved, we want to feel irreplaceable. We want to feel like what we built had weight, like it left a mark, like it couldn't just be swapped out like a profile picture. And when she replaced me in 7 days, it felt like I was lightweight, like I was something she could carry easily and set down just as easily. But here's the thing I keep wrestling with. Maybe it wasn't easy. Maybe it just looks easy. Social media never shows grief. It doesn't show reflection. It doesn't show confusion. It shows highlights. And maybe what I'm seeing is the highlight reel of her coping, because moving on quickly doesn't always mean you didn't care. Sometimes it means you can't sit still with pain. Sometimes it means you need distraction to avoid accountability. Sometimes it means you'd rather build something new than examine why the last thing broke. But none of that makes it easier to watch, because while she's building new memories, I'm still dismantling old ones. I'm still processing the last conversation, still remembering the way she used to look at me, still trying to figure out when it started fading. And that imbalance makes you feel like you lost twice. You lost the relationship, and you lost the race to move on. And I hate that it feels like a race, because healing shouldn't be competitive. But when someone replaces you in a week, it feels like you're the only one still standing in the wreckage, like she walked away from the crash without even looking back, and you're still checking for broken pieces. What hurts even more is knowing I didn't have a backup. I didn't have someone lined up. I didn't have a just in case. When we ended, it was just me in the silence, and I chose to sit in it, not because I wanted to suffer, but because I respect what we had enough to process it properly. So when she jumped into something new that fast, it felt like I was the only one honoring the history, like I was the only one treating it like it mattered. And that's a lonely feeling, to believe something was significant and watch the other person treat it like it was temporary. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe she didn't replace me. Maybe she replaced the feeling of being alone. Maybe she replaced the discomfort. Maybe she replaced the emptiness, because some people don't know how to sit with themselves after something ends. They need noise. They need attention. They need someone new to prove they're still wanted, and if that's the case, then her moving on in a week says more about her relationship with silence than it does about my value. Still, that doesn't stop the thoughts, because at night, logic fades and emotion gets loud. In those moments, it feels like I wasn't enough. Like if I had been better, stronger, more exciting, more something, she wouldn't have moved on that fast. But I have to remind myself, you can be enough for someone and still not be there forever. You can love someone deeply and still not be what they're built to keep. And if she could replace me in 7 days, then maybe I wasn't meant to stay in her life long term. Maybe I was a lesson. Maybe she was mine. But what I refuse to accept is that I was insignificant, because I know how I loved, I know how I showed up, I know how I committed, and those things don't become meaningless just because someone else moved quickly. If anything, they prove something about me, that I invest fully, that I don't keep backups, that I don't treat people like placeholders. And maybe that's rare. Maybe that's why this hurts more, because I wasn't halfway in. I was all the way in. And when you're all the way in, being replaced feels like being erased, but I'm not erased. I'm just healing at a pace that reflects depth, and depth doesn't reset in 7 days. So yeah, she replaced me in a week, but that week doesn't define my worth. It defines her coping speed. And one day when she finally slows down, she might realize you can replace a person's position, but you can't replace the way they loved you. And that's something no one swaps out in 7 days. There's a different kind of pain that comes from being replaced quickly. It's not just heartbreak, it's humiliation. And I don't mean humiliation in a loud, dramatic way. I mean the quiet kind, the kind where you sit alone thinking, how did I not see this coming? Because when someone moves on in a week, it makes you question your awareness. Were there signs I ignored? Did she emotionally detach months before I noticed? Was I holding on to something that was already slipping through my hands? And that's the part that messes with your head the most. Because now it's not just about losing her. It's about doubting yourself, your intuition, your judgment, your ability to read people. You start replaying moments that once felt normal. That random argument, that night she seemed distant, that time she picked up her phone and turned it away slightly, that period where she felt off but said she was fine. At the time, you trusted her words. Now you question everything, because if she replaced you in 7 days, your brain automatically assumes she had a head start. And whether that's true or not, the damage is the same. It makes you feel like you were the only one fully in it, like you were the only one fighting for something she had already decided to let go of. And that imbalance feels like betrayal, even if technically it wasn't, because the emotional timing didn't match. You were still invested, she was already transitioning, and that creates this gap, a painful one, where you're grieving something she already processed, or avoided, or replaced, and it makes you feel late, like you're the last one to realize the relationship was over. And I hate that feeling, because I don't like feeling behind. I don't like feeling like I was operating with outdated information. I don't like feeling like I was loving someone who had already emotionally packed their bags. But maybe that's the reality. Maybe the breakup wasn't the beginning of her detachment. Maybe it was the end of it. Maybe she had already done her grieving while I was still trying to fix things. And that realization hurts in a different way. Because now it's not just that she moved on fast, it's that she moved on before I even knew we were done. And I'm stuck here wondering when it actually ended. Was it weeks before the breakup? Months? Did she slowly disconnect while I was still showing up? Because that's the part nobody prepares you for. the possibility that you were loving someone who was already halfway gone. And if that's true, then I wasn't replaced in a week. I was replaced long before that. I just didn't know it yet. But here's the thing, I'm slowly starting to understand. Even if she emotionally left before I did, that doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me naive. It means I was committed. It means I was still trying. It means I was operating in good faith. And I'd rather be the one who stayed genuine than the one who quietly exited without saying it, because I know how I loved. I didn't keep options open. I didn't emotionally detach while pretending everything was fine. I didn't start building something new while something old was still alive. When I was in it fully. And if she replaced me in a week, then that says something about her capacity to detach, not about my capacity to matter. Still, that week will probably always sting, not because of the new guy, but because of what it symbolized. How quickly someone can shift focus, how fast attention can be redirected, how easy it can look to replace what felt permanent. But maybe permanence isn't about how long something lasts, maybe it's about how deeply it was felt. And if I'm still here processing it while she moved on fast, then maybe I was the one who felt it deeper. And that doesn't make me the loser. It makes me the one who actually experienced it. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase what I gave, and I refuse to let her timeline rewrite my value, because being replaced quickly hurts, but being genuine never does. There's something else that hurts about being replaced in a week. It makes you question whether you were ever chosen or just convenient, because if someone can transition that smoothly, that fast, it starts to feel like you were just occupying space, like you weren't irreplaceable, like you were temporary comfort, and nobody wants to feel like temporary comfort. I keep thinking about the way she used to look at me, the way she said things like, I don't see myself with anyone else, the way she made it seem like what we had was rare, and now I'm sitting here wondering how rare something can really be if it can be replaced in 7 days. That's what makes it sting. Because rarity isn't supposed to be swappable, depth isn't supposed to be interchangeable. If something is special, it's supposed to leave a gap when it's gone. But her life doesn't look like there was a gap, it looks filled immediately. And that creates this internal conflict. Was I overestimating my importance? Did I romanticize something that was lighter to her than it was to me? Because when you care deeply, you assume the other person feels the same weight. You assume the attachment is mutual. You assume the history matters equally, but being replaced quickly makes you realize something uncomfortable. Not everyone feels at the same depth you do. Some people attach fast and detach faster. Some people build quickly and rebuild quicker. Some people don't see relationships as something sacred. They see them as something seasonal. And maybe that's the difference between us. Maybe I treat connection like something that deserves reverence, and she treats it like something that deserves momentum, because momentum doesn't stop, it just redirects, and that's exactly what she did. She redirected. The same attention, the same affection, the same emotional energy, just different recipient, and that's hard to swallow because it makes you feel like the container didn't matter, just the feeling. But here's the part I'm slowly realizing. If someone can redirect their attachment that fast, then maybe what they were attached to wasn't you. It was the feeling of being with someone. And that's not the same thing. There's a difference between loving a person and loving the experience of not being alone. And if she loved the experience more than she loved me, then of course she could replace me quickly, because she wasn't replacing a soul connection, she was replacing the role. And that hurts, but it also clarifies, because I don't want to be someone's role. I don't want to be someone's emotional placeholder. I don't want to be someone's for now. I want to be chosen with intention, held with depth, missed when I'm gone. And if she could swap me out in a week, then maybe I wasn't held the way I thought I was. But that doesn't mean I wasn't valuable. It just means she didn't hold me deeply. And those are two different things. Still, there's something about the speed that keeps echoing. 7 days. It makes it feel like I didn't leave a mark, like like I didn't leave impact, like I didn't leave space. But I know that's not true because impact isn't measured by how long someone stays single. It's measured by what they learned, what they felt, what they carry forward. And even if she doesn't feel it now, one day when the distraction fades, when the excitement settles, when she's sitting in quiet, she might finally process what she skipped, and by then I won't be waiting. Because here's what I'm starting to understand. Being replaced quickly doesn't mean you were insignificant. It means the other person couldn't sit with loss, and loss reveals maturity. If I'm still here processing, still reflecting, still rebuilding, then I'm not behind, I'm just doing it properly. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase who I was, and I refuse to let her timeline determine my value, because I wasn't just someone she dated, I was someone who showed up fully, and that doesn't become meaningless just because someone else showed up faster. She replaced me in a week, but that week says more about her relationship with discomfort than it does about my worth. There's another layer to this that I don't talk about out loud. Anger, not loud anger, not screaming or crashing out. The quiet kind. The kind that sits in your chest when you realize how easily someone redirected what you treated like sacred. Because I stayed loyal, I stayed committed, I stayed focused, and she moved on in 7 days. That makes you question fairness. It makes you feel like you played the game honestly while someone else was already preparing their next move. And I hate that it feels like a game because I never approached it like one. When I was with her, I wasn't scanning the room for upgrades, I wasn't entertaining backups, I wasn't lining up options just in case. I was in it, fully, and now I'm sitting here realizing she either wasn't or she detached long before I knew. And that's what builds resentment. The idea that I was emotionally present while she was emotionally preparing. Because now it feels like I was loyal to a version of her that didn't exist anymore, like I was committed to something she had already mentally ended, and that realization stings. But here's where it shifts, because the anger starts turning into clarity. If she could replace me that quickly, then she was already disconnecting. And if she was already disconnecting, then the relationship wasn't as mutual as I believed. And if it wasn't mutual, then I wasn't losing someone who was fully invested. I was losing someone who was already halfway out. That doesn't make it hurt less, but it reframes it, because now it's not about me being not enough. It's about her not being anchored. Anchored people don't drift that fast. Anchored people don't swap attachments like playlists. Anchored people sit with loss, and if she didn't sit with it, then maybe she never held it deeply, and that realization hurts, but it also frees me, because I don't want someone who can replace depth with distraction. I don't want someone who needs constant attention to feel stable. I want someone who values history, who respects connection, who understands that what you build with someone isn't disposable. And if she replaced me in a week, then maybe I was disposable to her. But that doesn't mean I'm disposable in general. It just means she wasn't built to keep me. And there's a difference. Still, there's a part of me that wonders if she ever thinks about it, if she ever pauses, if she ever compares, if she ever realizes how fast she moved. But I can't live in that space, because waiting for someone to feel what you felt is a trap, and I refuse to trap myself in her timeline. 7 days, that's how fast she moved. But here's the truth. I'd rather take my time healing than rush into something new just to prove I can. I'd rather rebuild properly than distract myself temporarily, because I know what I gave, and I know how I showed up. And I know I don't need to rush into something new to validate that. She replaced me in a week, but I'm rebuilding myself at a pace that lasts, and that's not weakness, that's depth. You know what else being replaced in a week does? It makes you question whether you were ever truly seen. Because if someone really sees you, your patterns, your effort, your loyalty, your depth, they don't just slide into something new like you were a temporary rental. They feel the absence, they sit in it, they notice the difference, and I keep wondering if she noticed the quiet after I stopped calling, if she noticed the lack of consistency I used to bring, if she noticed that the stability I provided isn't something you just duplicate overnight, or if she just filled the silence so fast that there was no space to notice it all. That's what hurt, the possibility that I wasn't deeply registered, that I was experienced but not understood, because there's a difference between being with someone and truly knowing them. And when someone replaces you quickly, it feels like they never fully knew the weight of what they had. It feels like they liked the experience of you, not the essence of you, and I can handle someone not choosing me. But it's harder to handle feeling like I was easy to move past. I keep thinking about how careful I was, how intentional I was, how I didn't play games, how I didn't keep backups, how when things got hard, I leaned in instead of pulling away. And in the end, it feels like none of that slowed her down. 7 days. That number keeps echoing like a clock ticking in reverse, because for me, 7 days after a breakup feels raw. It feels heavy. It feels like I'm still adjusting to the silence, but for her, 7 days was enough to build something new. And that contrast makes you feel like you loved harder than you were loved. And that's a lonely realization, because loving harder isn't something you brag about. It's something you feel when the other person moves on faster, and you're left holding the emotional weight. But here's what I'm starting to see clearly. Just because she moved on quickly doesn't mean she processed it deeply. Speed isn't strength. Speed can be avoidance. Speed can be distraction. Speed can be ego protection. Sometimes people rush into something new not because the old thing meant nothing, but because it meant too much. Because sitting alone would force them to face what they lost, and not everyone is strong enough to sit in that kind of silence, and maybe I am. Maybe the reason I'm still here thinking, reflecting, feeling, is because I actually let it hit me. I didn't numb it, I didn't immediately replace it, I didn't run from it, I sat with it, and sitting with pain requires maturity. It requires discipline, it requires emotional depth. So maybe this isn't about me being less valuable, maybe it's about me being more capable of processing, and that's not weakness, that's growth. Still, there's something about knowing she's creating new memories that stings, because those were supposed to be ours. The random laughs, the new places, the inside jokes. Now someone else gets that version of her, and I have to let go of the idea that it was only meant for me. And that's hard, but here's the truth I can't ignore anymore. If she could replace me in a week, then I was loving someone who wasn't built to stay long term. Because people who are built to stay don't detach that fast. They don't redirect that easily. They don't swap depth for novelty overnight. And I don't want someone who can treat connection like it's interchangeable. I want someone who understands the weight of history. Who understands that what you build with someone isn't disposable? Who understands that real attachment doesn't reset in 7 days? So yeah, she replaced me in a week, but I'm rebuilding myself in a way that lasts longer than a rebound ever will. And when I look back at this one day, I won't just remember the hurt, I'll remember the clarity, because being replaced quickly doesn't mean you were insignificant. It means the other person wasn't anchored, and I refuse to confuse someone else's instability with my lack of worth. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase what I was. And one day, when I'm with someone who values depth the way I do, this week won't define me. It'll just be proof that I was never meant to stay where I was easily replaced. At some point, the hurt turns into something quieter. Not lighter, just quieter. Because you can only replay 7 days so many times before your brain gets tired of the echo. And when the noise slows down, clarity starts creeping in. I started asking myself a different question. Not why did she replace me so fast, but why am I measuring my value through her speed? Because that's what I was doing without realizing it. I was using her timeline as a mirror. If she moved on quickly, I must not have mattered deeply. If she looks happy, I must have been replaceable. If she didn't hesitate, I must not have left impact. But that logic is flawed. Her speed is not a measurement of my depth. Her distraction is not a reflection of my worth. Her ability to move forward quickly doesn't erase the way I showed up. And once I started separating those things, something shifted, because I know how I loved. I know I was intentional. I know I was loyal. I know I didn't treat what we had like it was temporary. So if she did, that says something about her capacity, not my value. And I had to stop turning her coping style into my insecurity, because that's what I was doing. I was letting her rebound rewrite my confidence. I was letting her quick transition convince me I was forgettable. But forgettable doesn't leave you reflecting. Forgettable doesn't leave you rebuilding. Forgettable doesn't leave you questioning your own growth. What we had meant something, even if she chose not to sit in that meaning. And maybe that's the difference between us. I process, she replaces. I reflect, she redirects. I sit with the silence, she fills it. And neither is necessarily wrong, but one builds depth, the other builds distraction, and depth always wins in the long run, because distraction fades, novelty fades, rebounds lose their adrenaline, and when that happens, whatever was avoided eventually resurfaces, and by then I won't be stuck in the same place, because while she rushed forward, I rebuilt properly. And rebuilding properly takes longer, but it lasts longer too. 7 days might have been enough for her to feel okay, but it wasn't enough for me to lose myself, and that's what matters. So yeah, she replaced me in a week. And for a while that felt like proof that I wasn't enough, proof that I was temporary, proof that I was easy to move past. But now, it feels like proof of something else. Proof that I love deeply, proof that I don't detach easily, proof that I don't treat connection like it's disposable. Because if I could have replaced her that fast and didn't, that says something. It says I value what I build. It says I respect history. It says I don't jump into something new just to soothe my ego. And I'd rather be the one who heals slowly than the one who forgets quickly. Because forgetting quickly doesn't mean you're strong. Sometimes it just means you're avoiding, and I don't want to avoid. I want to grow. I want to understand what worked, what didn't, what I tolerated, what I ignored. I want to rebuild my confidence without attaching it to someone else's timeline. She replaced me in a week, but she didn't replace my character. She didn't replace my loyalty. She didn't replace my ability to love fully. And one day, someone is going to experience that depth and recognize it immediately. Not treat it like a placeholder, not treat it like a phase, but treat it like something rare, because rare things don't get swapped in 7 days. They get protected, so maybe this wasn't about me being replaced, maybe it was about me being redirected away from someone who could move on that quickly towards someone who won't. 7 days hurt, but it also clarified. I don't want to be in a position where I can be replaced that easily ever again. And the only way to guarantee that is to choose someone who understands the weight of what they're holding, and next time, I will. I don't ask for much. I don't need constant reassurance. I don't need public displays. I don't need dramatic promises, but sometimes I catch myself wondering, do you even love me? Or do you just love the role I play in your life? Because there's a difference. Loving someone means you care about their heart. Liking what they do for you means you care about their presence, and those are not the same thing. I'm the easy one to love. I don't argue much, I don't complain often. Try to understand before reacting. I adjust, I compromise, I give space when needed. And sometimes I wonder if that's the problem, because when you're low maintenance, people forget maintenance is still required. Love isn't just staying, it's how you stay. Do you check in on my feelings without me hinting at them? Do you notice when my energy shifts? Do you protect my heart the same way I protect yours? Or do you just assume I'm fine because I don't break down in front of you? I think what hurts the most is not being unloved. It's being loved passively. Loved when it's convenient, loved when you need comfort, loved when I'm strong for you, but quiet when I need the same intensity back. That kind of love feels unbalanced, and imbalance turns into doubt. Sometimes I don't need more affection, I need clarity. clarity in actions, clarity in effort, clarity in consistency. Because love shouldn't feel seasonal, it shouldn't spike when you're lonely and fade when you're comfortable. It should be stable, not loud, stable. I've realized something. If I have to constantly question whether I'm loved, then something is missing. Not necessarily feelings, but expression. Because real love doesn't leave you in confusion. It reassures you without you begging for it. It shows up without you scheduling it. It protects your peace instead of disturbing it. And maybe you do love me. Maybe you just love differently. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. If your version of love doesn't make me feel secure, then it's incomplete, because love isn't just about what you feel internally. It's about what I experience externally. I don't want to beg to feel valued. I don't want to explain why consistency matters. I don't want to teach someone how to treat me with care. If I have to convince you to show up for me properly, that's not partnership, that's negotiation. And love shouldn't feel like negotiation. The scary part is this: I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to stay somewhere where I feel half chosen. Because half love is heavy, it keeps you close enough to hope but far enough to doubt, and doubt slowly eats at your confidence. So do you even love me? Maybe the better question is, do I feel loved consistently? Do I feel prioritized, protected, considered? Because love shouldn't feel like a mystery. It shouldn't feel like something I have to decode. If I'm loved, I should know. Not because you say it once, but because you show it daily. And if I ever have to keep asking myself whether I'm loved, that might mean I deserve a love that doesn't make me question it at all. We all know that one friend who's genuinely a good guy, not the fake nice kind, not the kind that's only good when it benefits him. I mean the real kind, the one who listens more than he talks, the one who checks in just because, one who walks her home, texts, "Let me know when you get there," and actually waits for the reply, not for points, not for validation. Just because that's who he is. He shows up when people call. He remembers small details. He gives effort without keeping score. And somehow, he's always the one that gets hurt. Girls say they want a good guy. They say they're tired of games, tired of being treated wrong. But when a good guy actually shows up, he gets pushed to the side, kept around just in case, treated like an option instead of a choice. He gets left on red, gets mixed signals, gets told, "You're amazing, just not right now." And then one day, he watches her choose someone who won't even do half of what he did. And the worst part? He doesn't complain about it, he jokes it off, acts like it doesn't bother him, plays it cool. But if you're paying attention, you see the change. He laughs less, questions himself more, starts wondering if being genuine is the problem. If caring too much makes him weak, if being a good guy even matters anymore, so he hardens a little, pulls back, stops giving as freely, not because he wants to be cold, but because the world keeps teaching him that softness gets punished. It reminds me of Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. Gentle, compassionate, kind even to people who don't deserve it. People mistake that kindness for weakness until they realize how much strength it actually takes to stay good in a cruel world. That's the truth people forget. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't dominate. It doesn't need to prove itself. Real strength is staying kind when life gives you every reason not to be. So if you know a guy like that, be there for him. Remind him that his heart isn't a flaw, that being good isn't something he needs to outgrow, because one day someone is going to see him, really see him, and they won't make him pay for the damage done by people who couldn't handle his heart. And when that happens, being a good guy will finally feel worth it. What people don't realize is how early the good guy starts changing himself without even noticing. At first it's small, he replies a little slower, he stops double texting, he thinks twice before doing something thoughtful because he's scared it'll be taken the wrong way, not appreciated, or worse, ignored. He starts asking himself questions he never used to ask. Am I doing too much? Should I care less? Why do I always end up like this? And that's dangerous, because now he's learning to dull the very traits that made him special. The world doesn't break good guys all at once. It chips away at him slowly. Every time his effort isn't matched, every time his loyalty is taken for granted, every time he's told he's perfect but still not chosen. Eventually he starts building walls, not because he wants to play games, but because he's tired of being the only one who loses when he plays fair. He watches people who treat others poorly get rewarded with attention, love, and chances, and he wonders what he's doing wrong for choosing empathy instead of ego. But here's what nobody tells him. Being a good guy isn't about what you receive immediately, it's about who you become long-term. Patience he has, the emotional awareness, the ability to love deeply without needing control. Those qualities don't disappear just because they've been overlooked. They mature, and when the right person finally comes along, those same traits won't feel like a burden. They'll feel like safety, like home, like something rare in a world full of half-effort and emotional detachment. The good guy doesn't lose. He just waits longer for the right win. There's also something else the good guy carries that no one talks about. Guilt for feeling angry when he's treated unfairly, guilt for wanting to pull away, guilt for even questioning whether being kind is worth it anymore, because deep down he doesn't want to become someone he wouldn't recognize. So instead of expressing that frustration, he swallows it. He tells himself to be patient, to be understanding, to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when they've shown him who they are multiple times. And that self-control, that restraint, it takes more strength than most people will ever realize, but it comes at a cost. He starts to feel invisible, like his effort only matters when it's convenient for someone else, like his loyalty is expected, not appreciated, and the scariest part isn't that people take advantage of him, it's that he starts expecting it. That's when the good guy begins to question his worth, not in a dramatic way, quietly, internally. He wonders if he needs to be colder to be respected, louder to be noticed, less caring to be chosen. And even though he doesn't like those thoughts, they creep in anyway. But here's the truth he needs to hear. The world doesn't need more detached people pretending they don't care. It needs more people who choose kindness, even when it's inconvenient. More people who know how to love without manipulation. More people who stay solid when everything around them feels fake. The good guy isn't weak for feeling deeply. He's strong for not letting pain turn him into something he's not. And one day that integrity will matter more than all the times he was overlooked. At some point, the good guy has to learn a hard lesson. Being kind doesn't mean being available to everyone. Being loyal doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. And having a good heart doesn't mean you owe it to people who keep proving they don't know how to handle it. This is usually the stage where he starts choosing himself. Not in a selfish way, not in a bitter way, but in a quiet, self-respecting way. He stops chasing people who only reach out when it's convenient. He stops over-explaining his intentions. He stops proving that he's different. Because the truth is, the right people don't need convincing. The good guy learns that boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They don't block love, they block misuse. And once he understands that, everything changes. He becomes more selective with his energy, more intentional with who gets access to him. He still cares deeply, but now it's earned. This is where his strength really shows. He doesn't become cruel, he doesn't become cold, he just becomes aware. He learns that love shouldn't feel like constantly waiting your turn, that effort shouldn't feel one-sided, that if someone truly values you, they won't make you question where you stand. And when he finally meets someone who matches his energy, who sees his kindness as safety instead of weakness, it clicks. All the waiting, all the hurt, all the doubt, it suddenly makes sense. Because the good guy wasn't wrong for being good. He was just giving his heart to the wrong people. There's a moment where the good guy finally realized something important. He was never meant to be understood by everyone. His way of loving was never designed for people who thrive on attention, chaos, or option. It was meant for someone who values depth, consistency, and intention. And once that clicks, he stops feeling ashamed of who he is. He understands now that not everyone deserves access to his softness, that some people only know how to take, not receive. And that doesn't make him naive, it makes him discerning. He doesn't need to change his heart, he just needs to protect it better. The good guy learns how to walk away without guilt, not because he stopped caring, but because he started caring about himself too. He learns that choosing peace over potential isn't giving up, it's growth. That silence is sometimes the loudest form of self-respect, and slowly something shifts. He speaks clearer, stops apologizing for having standards. He no longer wonders if being a good guy is worth it. He knows it is, because even if the world tried to harden him, it didn't succeed. He stayed true, and that integrity, that's something no one can take from him. One day, someone will meet him where he is. They won't question his intention. They won't test his loyalty. They won't confuse kindness for weakness. They'll recognize it immediately, and they'll protect it the same way he does. Until then, the good guy keeps moving forward, not bitter, not broken, just wiser. And when that day comes, it won't feel dramatic. It won't feel like a movie moment where everything suddenly makes sense all at once. It'll feel calm, familiar, almost quiet, because the right person won't make the good guy question himself. They won't make him wonder if he's doing too much or not enough. They won't make him feel like he has to shrink his heart to be accepted. They'll meet him where he stands. They'll appreciate the way he listens, the way he shows up, the way he loves without keeping score. And for the first time, he won't feel like his kindness is a liability. It'll feel like a gift, something mutual, something protected, something finally returned. The good guy won't have to explain himself anymore. He won't have to prove that his intentions are real. He won't have to play it cool or pretend he doesn't care. He'll be allowed to be exactly who he is, and that'll be enough. Until then, the journey matters. Every disappointment taught him boundaries. Every heartbreak taught him discernment. Every moment of doubt sharpened his sense of self. He didn't lose those years being overlooked. He was being prepared to recognize real love when it shows up, prepared to walk away from anything that feels half-hearted, prepared to protect his heart without hardening. So if you're that good guy reading this, don't change. Don't let the world convince you that you need to become colder to survive. Stay solid, stay honest, stay kind. Just be selective with who gets that version of you. Because the world doesn't need fewer good guys. It needs people brave enough to stay good even when it's easier not to. What people never see is how much discipline it takes for the good guy to stay the way he is. Every bad experience tempts him to harden up. Every time he's overlooked, replaced, or taken for granted, there's a voice in his head telling him to stop caring so much, to move differently, to love less, to become like everyone else. But he doesn't. Not because it's easy, but because he knows who he is. He understands now that changing his character to fit a broken system would only cost him himself, and losing yourself just to be chosen by the wrong people is a price that's too high. So instead of becoming colder, he becomes more intentional. Instead of closing his heart, he narrows the door. He learns that being good doesn't mean being accessible to everyone. It means being principled. It means having the strength to say no, to walk away, to choose solitude over disrespect. And that kind of self-control, that's rare. The good guy also learns to forgive, not to excuse what hurt him, but to free himself from carrying resentment. He doesn't want bitterness living rent-free in his heart. He wants peace, growth, clarity, and forgiveness is part of that process. And one day, when someone finally meets him with the same depth, the same consistency, the same effort, he'll recognize it immediately. Not because it feels intense, but because it feels familiar. Until then, he keeps building, keeps healing, keeps choosing integrity over impulse, because the good guy isn't waiting to be saved. He's becoming someone worth meeting. In the end, the good guy doesn't get a dramatic apology from everyone who hurt him. He doesn't get closure from every situation that left scars. And he doesn't get a moment where the world suddenly admits it was wrong for overlooking him. What he gets is something quiet and far more powerful. He gets peace. Peace in knowing he never had to become someone else to survive. Peace in knowing his heart stayed intact even after everything. Peace in knowing he loved honestly in a world that often rewards the opposite. He looks back and realizes that every time he was ignored, every time he was treated like an option, every time he was underestimated, it wasn't a reflection of his worth. It was a reflection of who couldn't meet him where he stood. And that understanding changes everything, because now he doesn't crave validation. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He knows who he is. And when love finally finds him, the kind that's mutual, intentional, and steady, it won't feel like winning. It'll feel like alignment, like finally being understood without having to explain yourself, like being valued without having to prove. Until then, the good guy keeps walking forward, not bitter, not resentful, not hard, just grounded. And that's the kind of strength no one can take. The worst kind of pain is caring deeply and watching it backfire. Not because you expect anything in return, but because caring is just who you are. You show up without being asked. You check in on people who never think to check on you. You stay up late listening to problems that were never yours to carry. You give your time, your energy, your patience, not to be praised, just because you care, and somehow that becomes the thing that hurts you. Because some people don't meet kindness with care. They get comfortable with it. They start expecting it. They stop noticing it. Your effort becomes routine. Your consistency becomes invisible until one day you don't show up the same way anymore. That's when they finally notice. That's when they ask what's wrong. But by then you're already tired of explaining your intentions, tired of proving your heart, tired of giving pieces of yourself to people who never stay long enough to understand what it costs you. It's not that you regret caring, you just wish having a good heart didn't hurt this much. And maybe the hardest truth is realizing that loving deeply doesn't guarantee you'll be loved the same way. But that doesn't make your softness a weakness. It just means it needs protection. Don't stop caring. Just be careful who you hand that kind of love to. When you're the one who cares deeply, you usually become not the reliable one, the one people vent to, the one people lean on, the one who always answers. You're dependable in ways people don't even notice anymore. They assume you'll be there, assume you'll understand, assume you'll forgive, so they stop asking how you are, not out of cruelty, but because consistency gets mistaken for endless capacity. You start carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be yours alone. Other people's stress, other people's problems, other people's moods, and you hold it all quietly because you don't want to be a burden the way you never see them as one. But over time, something shifts. You feel tired in a deeper way, not just physically, emotionally. You notice how rarely someone shows up for you the way you show up for them, how quickly your needs get overlooked, how easily your exhaustion goes unseen. And that's when it starts to hurt differently, because you didn't ask for much, you just wanted effort to meet effort, care to meet care, but instead you became the place people take from without realizing they're draining you, and slowly being the strong one starts to feel like being the forgotten one. Eventually something changes, not in a dramatic way. You don't announce it, you don't make a scene, you just stop giving the same way you used to. You reply a little later, you don't over-explain anymore. You stop stretching yourself thin just to be available, and that's when people notice. Not when you were exhausted, not when you were drained, not when you were giving everything. They notice when you pull back. Suddenly they ask what's wrong. Suddenly they feel the distance. Suddenly they miss the version of you that was always there. And that part hurts because it shows you something you didn't want to see. They didn't miss you. They missed the access. They missed the comfort you provided, the effort you gave without question, the way you made things easier for them. So when you stop showing up like that, it feels personal to them. But for you, it wasn't about punishment. It was about survival. You didn't stop caring. You just stop bleeding quietly, and realizing that is both painful and freeing because it teaches you this: anyone who only notices your absence was never really paying attention to your presence. When you finally start pulling back, the hardest part isn't the silence, it's the guilt. You feel like you're doing something wrong just by protecting yourself. You second guess every boundary. You wonder if you're being cold, if you're being selfish, if you're changing. Because when you spent your life being the one who gives, rest feels like laziness, distance feels like cruelty, and saying no feels like failure. You weren't taught how to have limits. You were taught how to endure. So the moment you stop overextending, your nervous system panics. It tells you to explain yourself, to soften it, to give just a little more so no one feels uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Boundaries don't feel good at first because you're used to being useful, not protected. You learned that love meant access, that care meant availability, that being needed was the same as being valued. So when you remove access, it feels like you're taking something away, but you're not. You're just finally keeping something for yourself. And that discomfort, that's not you doing something wrong. That's you breaking a pattern that was costing you more than you realized. People who care deeply often confuse love with sacrifice. They believe loving someone means giving more, trying harder, holding on longer than they should. They tell themselves, if I'm patient enough, they'll notice. If I stay kind, it'll balance out. If I keep showing up, it'll be worth it. But love was never meant to cost you your peace. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being good meant being accommodating, that being loving meant putting yourself last. So you stayed quiet about your needs. You ignored your exhaustion. You told yourself it wasn't that bad as long as everyone else was okay. But sacrifice without reciprocity doesn't make love deeper. It makes it heavier. Because when you're always the one adjusting, the relationship stops being shared. It becomes one-sided. And the scariest part is people can get used to that version of you. They don't ask if it's costing you anything. They just assume you'll keep paying the price until one day you realize love shouldn't feel like self-abandonment. Caring deeply doesn't mean giving endlessly, and loving someone should never require you to disappear in the process. There's a moment when something finally clicks. You get tired of proving that you're genuine, tired of explaining your intentions, tired of showing people your heart just so they can decide whether it deserves care. So you stop performing, you don't overextend anymore, you don't chase reassurance, you don't give more just to feel secure. And at first that feels uncomfortable because you're not used to being this guarded. You're used to leading with softness even when it costs you. But protecting your heart isn't the same as closing it. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming selective. You start noticing who respects your limits and who only liked you when you were endlessly available. You see who adjusts with you, instead of expecting you to bend every time, and that's when you realize something important. You don't need to prove your kindness. The right people will feel it without needing to take advantage of it. Protecting your heart doesn't make you less loving. It just means you're finally loving yourself too. Once you stop overgiving, you start noticing something clearly. Not everyone reacts the same way. Some people get uncomfortable, they push back, they ask why you're different now. They miss the version of you that gave without limits and never asked for anything back. But others adjust. They respect the boundary. They meet you halfway. They don't make you feel guilty for needing space or balance. And that difference matters because it shows you who valued you and who only valued what you provided. The right people don't punish you for protecting your heart. They don't withdraw when you stop overextending. They lean in. They check on you. They notice your effort because it's no longer automatic. They give without keeping score. And for the first time, caring doesn't feel draining. It feels mutual. You realize you don't have to shrink your heart to keep people around. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be worthy of love. The people meant for you won't disappear when you stop bleeding quietly. They'll stay because they never needed you to hurt in order to feel close. At the end of all this, you realize something important. Your softness was never the problem. Caring deeply wasn't a mistake. Being attentive wasn't wrong. Showing up wasn't foolish. The pain came from giving that level of care to people who didn't know how to hold it. Because the right people don't drain you. They don't get comfortable taking. They don't wait until you pull back to finally notice your value. They see it while you're still giving, and they give back. The With the right people, your kindness doesn't become invisible, your effort doesn't become expected, your heart doesn't become something to manage, it becomes appreciated. You don't have to prove yourself, you don't have to overextend, you don't have to lose pieces of yourself just to stay connected. Your softness becomes strength because it's met with care, not entitlement, and that's when you understand the goal was never to stop caring, it was to stop pouring your heart into places that couldn't return it. So keep your softness, just place it wisely, because in the right hands your heart won't hurt this much. It'll finally feel safe. You don't chase love because you're romantic. You chase love because you don't know how to sit with yourself yet. Because silence makes your thoughts loud. Because being alone feels like proof that something about you isn't enough. So you look for love to fill the space. You attach quickly. You overextend. You give more than you should, sooner than you should. Not because you're stupid, but because being chosen feels like relief. Like if someone wants you, then maybe you can stop questioning yourself for a while. You don't just want connection. You want validation. You want someone to prove that you're worth staying for, worth prioritizing, worth choosing. So when someone shows interest, you lean in hard. You ignore red flags. You excuse inconsistency. You tell yourself, if I love them better, they'll love me back. And when they pull away, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms your worst fear, that you weren't enough. So you try harder, you become more available, more understanding, more forgiving than you should be. You abandon parts of yourself just to keep someone close, and you call it love. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not chasing them. You're chasing the feeling of being wanted. Because when someone loves you, even temporarily, it quiets the voice in your head that says you're unlovable on your own. That's why breakups destroy you. You don't just lose the person, you lose the version of yourself that felt okay for a moment. You lose the distraction. You lose the proof. You lose the illusion that someone else could fix what you haven't faced yet. And that's the part no one wants to admit. Chasing love like this isn't romance. It's avoidance. It's using someone else's attention to avoid learning how to give it to yourself. Because loving yourself is harder than loving someone else. It means sitting with your flaws without asking someone to overlook them. It means choosing yourself without needing applause. It means learning how to feel whole without being held together by another person. And that terrifies you, so you chase love instead. But here's the shift, the part that hurts before it heals. The moment you stop chasing love to fill the emptiness, you start attracting it from a different place. Not desperation, not fear, not self-doubt, but choice. Because real love doesn't arrive to save you. It arrives when you're no longer asking someone else to convince you that you matter. And until you learn to sit with yourself, without distraction, without validation, without escape, every love you chase will feel heavier than it should. You don't need someone to love you harder. You need to stop outsourcing your worth. And when you finally do, love stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like connection. You don't chase love because you're passionate. You chase it because being alone feels unbearable. Because when things get quiet, your thoughts get loud, and they don't tell you kind things. So you look for someone else to sit in that space with you, to distract you, to validate you, to make you feel wanted enough to forget how little you feel about yourself. You don't just want connection, you want relief. Relief from the constant feeling that something about you is missing, that you're behind, that if you were enough, someone would have stayed by now. So when someone shows interest, you grab onto it, you attach fast, you give more than you should, you bend your boundaries before they even ask, not because you're weak, but because being chosen feels like proof. Like if someone wants you, then maybe the voice in your head can finally shut up for a while. You start confusing attention with love, consistency with commitment, chemistry with safety, and when they pull away, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms everything you were afraid of. So you chase harder, you explain more, you forgive more, you accept less. You tell yourself that if you just love them better, they'll love you back the way you need. But what you're really doing is asking someone else to give you a sense of worth you don't know how to give yourself yet. And that's why it feels so desperate, because it's not about them. It's about the fear that without love, you have nothing to stand on. This isn't romance, it's survival. And until you learn how to sit with yourself without needing someone else to make you feel okay, every love you chase will feel heavier than it should. At some point, chasing love turns into abandoning yourself. You stop asking what you need and start asking what they want, how much space to give, how much to hold back, how to be easier to stay with. You shrink in small ways at first. You don't bring things up because you don't want to seem difficult. You accept less effort because at least they're still here. You tell yourself you're being understanding when really you're being afraid that if you ask for more, they'll leave. So you adapt. You become more available than you should, more forgiving than is healthy. You explain away behavior that already made you feel small, and every time you do, you move a little further away from yourself, but you call it love. You tell yourself this is what it means to fight for someone, to be patient, to be loyal. What you don't realize yet is that real love doesn't require you to disappear quietly. The reason chasing feels exhausting is because you're running from your own emptiness. You're hoping someone else will choose you loudly enough to silence the doubt inside you. So when they pull back, your anxiety spikes, you replay conversations, you blame yourself, you look for ways to fix it, not because you were wrong, but because you're terrified of being left alone with yourself again. And that's the cycle. The more you chase, the more you lose your footing. The more you lose yourself, the more you need them to feel okay. That's why it hurts so much, not because they were everything, but because you made them responsible for holding you together. And no one can carry that forever. This is the part people avoid talking about. Chasing love like this doesn't mean you care deeply. It means you don't feel grounded without external validation. And until you learn how to stand on your own, how to sit with yourself without needing to be chosen, love will keep feeling like something you have to earn instead of something you share. When you chase love from a place of emptiness, you don't attract people who pour into you. You attract people who take, not always intentionally, not always maliciously, but people who sense, even subconsciously, that you're willing to overgive just to stay connected. They feel how flexible you are, how much you're willing to adjust, how far you'll bend before you break. So they let you. They accept your effort without matching it. They enjoy your presence without committing to it. They keep you close enough to benefit from your care, but far enough to avoid responsibility. And because you're chasing, you don't question it at first. You tell yourself this is just how relationships work, that love takes patience, that maybe they just need time. But deep down, something feels off. You're always the one checking in, always the one clarifying, always the one trying to fix the distance that keeps appearing out of nowhere. And instead of asking why they're inconsistent, you ask what you did wrong. That's the trap. Chasing love trains you to blame yourself for other people's lack of effort. You start believing that if someone isn't choosing you, it's because you didn't love them well enough. So you try harder. You give more reassurance, more patience, more access to parts of you that should have been protected, and the dynamic deepens. They stay comfortable, you stay anxious, they get affection without accountability, you get hope without security, and that imbalance keeps repeating until you finally see it for what it is. You're not unlucky in love, you're just chasing from a place that tells the wrong people you'll accept less than you deserve, because people who are capable of real love don't feel comfortable being chased. They meet you halfway. The ones who stay distant, inconsistent, unclear, they stay because the chase benefits them. And until you stop chasing to feel worthy, you'll keep finding yourself in the same story with different faces. Eventually, there's a moment where chasing love stops feeling hopeful and starts feeling exhausting. You realize you're tired, not because love is hard, but because you've been doing all the emotional work alone. You're the one overthinking, the one adjusting, the one trying to hold something together that keeps slipping through your fingers. And for the first time, you ask a quiet question you've been avoiding. Why does love feel like something I have to prove myself worthy of? That question is uncomfortable because it points inward. It forces you to see that chasing love has been a distraction, a way to avoid sitting with yourself, a way to avoid asking why you don't feel enough without someone choosing you. Because as long as you're focused on them, their mixed signals, their distance, their inconsistency, you don't have to face the emptiness underneath. You don't have to ask why you're afraid of being alone, why validation feels necessary, why rejection feels like confirmation instead of redirection. So you keep chasing, but here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Chasing love delays self-healing. Every ounce of energy you spend trying to be chosen is energy you're not spending, learning how to choose yourself, and that's why nothing ever feels settled, because no matter who you're with, you're still looking to them to fix something they didn't break. They can't give you security you haven't built internally. They can't love you into self-worth. They can't silence the doubt that existed before they arrived. And once you see that, chasing loses its appeal, not because you stop wanting love, but because you realize love isn't supposed to feel like survival. It's supposed to feel like addition, not rescue. And the moment you stop running from yourself is the moment the chase starts to lose its power. Learning how to sit with yourself is the hardest part of this whole process, because when you stop chasing love, there's nothing left to distract you. No text to wait for, no signals to decode, no person to center your emotions around, just you. And that's when everything you've been avoiding comes to the surface. The insecurity you buried under effort, the loneliness you masked with attachment, the belief that without someone choosing you, you don't really matter. It feels uncomfortable at first, almost unbearable. You reach for your phone instinctively. You miss the chaos. You miss feeling needed. Because chasing gave your pain direction, it gave your emptiness a target. Now there's nowhere to run. And this is where most people go back. They re-enter old dynamics, text people they shouldn't, lower their standards just enough to feel wanted again, not because they're weak, but because sitting with yourself requires honesty. It forces you to see that no one abandoned you the way you've been abandoning yourself. Every time you chased someone who was unsure, you told yourself your needs could wait. Every time you accepted inconsistency, you taught yourself to tolerate being half chosen. So being alone feels unfamiliar, not because you can't handle it, but because you've never stayed here long enough to build something solid inside yourself. This is where self-love actually starts, not affirmations, not confidence quotes, but learning how to stay when there's no validation coming in. Learning how to comfort yourself instead of outsourcing it. Learning how to choose yourself without needing approval. And slowly, something shifts. You stop craving attention. You stop confusing intensity with connection. You stop chasing people who feel familiar for the wrong reasons. Because now, you're no longer running from yourself. And when you stop doing that, love stops feeling like something you need to survive. When you finally start building self-love, the chase doesn't just slow down, it feels wrong. You notice it first in small ways. The anxiety doesn't hook you the same. Inconsistency doesn't feel exciting anymore. It feels draining. People who once felt magnetic now feel loud, unclear, unsafe, and that confuses you because for so long, chaos felt like chemistry. You were drawn to people who kept you guessing because guessing felt familiar, because uncertainty mirrored how unsure you felt about yourself. But now that you're learning how to stand on your own, that dynamic stops working. You don't feel the urge to prove yourself anymore. You don't feel the need to over-explain your worth. And suddenly, chasing feels humiliating, not because you're above it, but because you're finally grounded enough to feel how one-sided it always was. You start wanting different things: clarity instead of sparks, consistency instead of intensity, presence instead of pursuit. You want to be met, not chased or chasing. And here's the part people don't expect. Self-love makes some connections fall apart. People who benefited from your overgiving feel the shift immediately. They sense you're no longer bending, no longer available on demand, no longer trying to earn their attention, and some of them leave. not because you changed for the worse, but because the version of you that chased them is gone. That can hurt, because even when you're healing, loss still feels like loss, but this time it doesn't destroy you, because you're no longer tying your value to someone else's choice. You understand something now. Love that requires chasing is love that feeds on insecurity, and love that's healthy doesn't need pursuit to survive. It shows up, it stays, it chooses you without being convinced, and the more you learn how to love yourself quietly, consistently, honestly, the less tolerance you have for anything that makes you feel like you need to beg to belong. When the chasing finally stops, a new fear shows up. Not the fear of being alone, but the fear of trusting love again without desperation. Because now you're calmer, more grounded, less reactive, and that feels unfamiliar. You're used to love coming with anxiety, with overthinking, with that constant urge to secure someone's attention before it disappears. So when things are steady, part of you doesn't know what to do. You wait for the other shoe to drop. You look for signs something is wrong. You brace yourself for distance that never comes, because chaos used to feel like proof that something mattered. Now peace feels suspicious. You're not chasing anymore, but you're still learning how to receive, how to let someone show up without questioning why, how to accept consistency without trying to earn it. And that's harder than it sounds, because chasing trained you to believe love had to be worked for, that if you weren't doing something, fixing something, proving something, it wouldn't last. So when someone meets you without needing to be convinced, your instinct is to pull back, not because you don't want it, but because you're afraid of trusting something that isn't fueled by fear. This is the quiet stage of healing, where you're not running anymore, but you're not fully relaxed either. You're learning that love doesn't have to feel urgent to be real, that being chosen calmly is still being chosen, and slowly you start letting yourself believe it. You stop checking for exits, stop rehearsing disappointment, stop preparing for abandonment that hasn't happened, because for the first time, you're not chasing to feel worthy. You're standing still and letting love come to you. And that's when you realize how much strength it actually takes to stay. When you stop needing love to save you, everything about it changes. You're not chasing anymore, but you're also not hiding. You're just stable, and that's unfamiliar. You notice how different it feels to want someone instead of needing them. There's no panic behind it, no urgency, no feeling that if this doesn't work out, you'll fall apart. And that scares you in a new way, because chasing gave you purpose. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It made love feel intense, consuming, alive. Now love feels quieter, not empty, just grounded. You don't lose yourself in people anymore. You don't rearrange your life to keep someone interested. You don't abandon your needs to avoid being left. And because of that, you become harder to hook, not emotionally unavailable, just unavailable to dynamics that require you to shrink. You start noticing things you used to ignore, how someone responds to boundaries, how they handle consistency, how they show up when you're not overgiving. And if they fade when you stop chasing, you don't panic, you understand. They weren't there for you. They were there for the version of you that was always reaching. That realization hurts, but it also frees you. Because now you know love that disappears when you stop chasing was never love meant to stay. This is where self-love changes the rules. You don't try to be impressive, you don't try to be indispensable, you don't try to secure someone's feelings. You let them show you who they are when you're not doing all the work, and for the first time, love feels optional, not because it doesn't matter, but because your worth no longer depends on it. You're not chasing to fill a void anymore. You're choosing from a place that already feels whole, and that's when love stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like something you can welcome without losing yourself. Healing doesn't just bring relief, it brings grief, because when you stop chasing love, you don't just lose old dynamics, you lose the version of yourself who survived by reaching. You look back at who you were and feel a strange mix of sadness and compassion. You remember how hard you tried, how much you gave, how badly you wanted to be chosen, and part of you wants to go back, not because it was healthy, but because it was familiar. Chasing gave you direction. It gave your pain something to focus on. It made loneliness feel purposeful. Now that version of you is gone, and that hurts. You grieve the person who believed love had to be earned, who thought being enough meant being useful, agreeable, easy to keep. You grieve the nights you waited, the messages you rewrote, the boundaries you swallowed just to stay connected, not because you were weak, but because you didn't know another way yet. And healing means accepting something painful. No one did this to you. You did it because you didn't know how to hold yourself without being held. That realization can feel brutal because it removes the villain. There's no one left to blame, just patterns you learn to survive something deeper. So you sit with it, with the sadness, with the regret, with the understanding that you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. And slowly, that grief turns into respect. Respect for how much you endured, for how deeply you wanted love, for how brave it was to keep believing, even in the wrong places. You don't hate the old version of you. You thank them because they carried you until you were strong enough to stop chasing and start choosing yourself. And that's what makes this stage heavy. You're not broken anymore, but you're still letting go. The chase ends the moment you stop asking love to fix you, not because you stop wanting connection, but because you stop needing it to feel whole. You finally understand something simple that took you years to learn. Love was never supposed to be proof that you matter. It was never meant to carry your worth, never meant to quiet your self-doubt, never meant to save you from yourself. That was too much to ask of anyone. So you stopped chasing, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You stop running after people who make you feel uncertain. Stop explaining your needs to people who don't listen. Stop overgiving just to feel chosen, because now being chosen by yourself comes first. You learn how to sit with silence without panicking, how to be alone without feeling abandoned, how to exist without needing constant reassurance, and something changes. Love no longer feels urgent, it no longer feels like survival. It no longer feels like something you have to secure before it disappears. It becomes optional, not because it's unimportant, but because your life no longer collapses without it. And that's when the real shift happens. You don't attract love from desperation anymore. You don't bond through wounds. You don't mistake intensity for connection. You choose slowly. You choose clearly. You choose from a place that isn't begging to be filled. And if someone doesn't meet you there, you don't chase. You let them go, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to stop repeating the same pain with different people. The version of you that chased love wasn't weak. They were hurting, they were lonely, they were trying to survive. But this version of you, this version doesn't run. They stand still, they breathe. They choose themselves even when no one is watching. And from here on out, love won't feel like something you have to earn. It'll feel like something you share with someone who meets you without being chased. That's where the cycle ends. Not with finding love, but with finally finding yourself. Dating feels rigged now. Not in a dramatic, love doesn't exist way, but in a quiet, frustrating way. Like the rules changed while I was still playing by the old ones. I grew up thinking effort mattered, consistency mattered, loyalty mattered. I thought if you showed up honestly, communicated clearly, and moved with intention, things would naturally fall into place. But now, it feels like the opposite gets rewarded. The emotionally unavailable ones get chased. The inconsistent ones get excused. The ones who barely text back somehow stay mysterious. And the ones who actually try, they're too available. It's like showing effort is unattractive now. Like caring too much is a flaw. And that messes with your head. Because I don't want to become someone who plays games. But it feels like the game is designed for people who do. Dating used to feel simple. You liked someone, you talked, you built something. Now it feels strategic. How long should I wait before replying? Should I seem busy? Should I hold back how much I like them? Should I act like I care less than I do? Why does authenticity feel like a disadvantage? It's exhausting because I don't want to calculate emotions. I don't want to pretend I'm less interested just to seem more attractive. But the moment you show real interest, there's this fear that you'll lose leverage. Leverage, that's what dating feels like now. Leverage, who cares less, who replies slower, who has more options, and I'm tired of that dynamic because love isn't supposed to feel like a power struggle. It's supposed to feel mutual. What really makes it feel rigged is this: the more healed you are, the harder it feels to connect. If you have boundaries, you're too strict. If you communicate clearly, you're too serious. If you move intentionally, you're moving too fast. But if you're emotionally distant, if you're inconsistent, if you keep people guessing, that's attractive, and I don't understand it because I worked on myself. I healed attachment issues. I learned to communicate instead of shutting down. I stopped chasing people who weren't sure about me, and somehow that made dating harder. It feels like emotional maturity is rare, and when it is rare, it's misunderstood. There's also the illusion of options. Social media makes it look like everyone is replaceable, like there's always someone better one swipe away. So instead of building through discomfort, people reset. Instead of communicating through confusion, people ghost. Instead of fixing, they upgrade. And that constant availability of more makes commitment feel fragile. Why work through something hard when you can just download someone new? It's a dangerous mindset because real connection isn't built in perfect conditions. It's built through friction, through patience, through staying, but staying feels outdated, and that's what makes it feel rigged. I think the hardest part is trying to stay authentic in a system that rewards detachment. I don't want to pretend I don't care. I don't want to act busy to seem important. I don't want to withhold affection to build mystery, but I also don't want to keep feeling like the only one showing up fully, because over time, you start wondering if you need to adapt, if you need to become colder, more distant, more unpredictable, and that's scary because I don't want dating to change my character. I don't want to start playing games just because everyone else is. Dating feels rigged because effort isn't always matched. You can show up consistently and still get replaced. You can communicate clearly and still get ghosted. You can be loyal and still get cheated on. And after enough of that, it starts to feel pointless. Like, what's the reward for doing it right? Where's the payoff for emotional maturity? But maybe that's the wrong perspective. Maybe dating isn't rigged, maybe it's filtering. Maybe the people who run from consistency are showing you they aren't built for it. Maybe the ones who disappear at the first sign of depth were never ready for it. And maybe the frustration is proof that you've outgrown surface level connections. Still, it's tiring. Tiring to reintroduce yourself, tiring to explain your intentions, tiring to build from scratch, tiring to stay optimistic when patterns repeat, because every time something doesn't work out, you question yourself. Am I too much, too intense, too available, too honest? And when those questions stack up, dating stops feeling exciting. It starts feeling like a test you didn't study for. But here's something I'm starting to realize. The right person won't make dating feel like strategy. They won't reward detachment. They won't require you to care less to keep them interested. They won't need games to stay engaged. With the right person, effort won't feel like a disadvantage. It'll feel matched. And maybe that's rare, but rare doesn't mean impossible. It just means selective. Dating feels rigged when you're trying to build something real in a culture that normalizes temporary. But I refuse to downgrade my standards just to fit in. I refuse to act uninterested just to attract interest. I refuse to pretend I don't want something meaningful, because I do, and I'd rather struggle finding something real than succeed at something shallow. Dating feels rigged, but maybe it's only rigged for people who want depth, because depth requires patience, it requires alignment, it requires two people who are equally ready, and that combination isn't common. So maybe it's not rigged, maybe it's just rare, and rare takes time. I won't become colder just to win. I won't play detached just to feel chosen. I'll stay intentional, even if it means slower, because the right connection won't reward games, it'll reward honesty. And when that happens, dating won't feel rigged anymore. It'll finally feel aligned. I don't ask for much. I don't need constant reassurance. I don't need public displays. I don't need dramatic promises, but sometimes I catch myself wondering, do you even love me? Or do you just love the role I play in your life? Because there's a difference. Loving someone means you care about their heart. Liking what they do for you means you care about their presence, and those are not the same thing. I'm the easy one to love. I don't argue much. I don't complain often. Try to understand before reacting. I adjust. I compromise. I give space when needed. And sometimes I wonder if that's the problem. Because when you're low maintenance, people forget maintenance is still required. Love isn't just staying, it's how you stay. Do you check in on my feelings without me hinting at them? Do you notice when my energy shifts? Do you protect my heart the same way I protect yours? Or do you just assume I'm fine because I don't break down in front of you? I think what hurts the most is not being unloved, it's being loved passively. Loved when it's convenient, loved when you need comfort, loved when I'm strong for you, but quiet when I need the same intensity back. That kind of love feels unbalanced, and imbalance turns into doubt. Sometimes I don't need more affection, I need clarity. Clarity in actions, clarity in effort, clarity in consistency. Because love shouldn't feel seasonal, it shouldn't spike when you're lonely and fade when you're comfortable. It should be stable, not loud, stable. I've realized something. If I have to constantly question whether I'm loved, then something is missing. Not necessarily feelings, but expression. Because real love doesn't leave you in confusion. It reassures you without you begging for it. It shows up without you scheduling it. It protects your peace instead of disturbing it. And maybe you do love me. Maybe you just love differently. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. If your version of love doesn't make me feel secure, then it's incomplete, because love isn't just about what you feel internally. It's about what I experience externally. I don't want to beg to feel valued. I don't want to explain why consistency matters. I don't want to teach someone how to treat me with care. If I have to convince you to show up for me properly, that's not partnership, that's negotiation. And love shouldn't feel like negotiation. The scary part is this. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to stay somewhere where I feel half chosen. Because half love is heavy, it keeps you close enough to hope but far enough to doubt, and doubt slowly eats at your confidence. So do you even love me? Maybe the better question is, do I feel loved consistently? Do I feel prioritized, protected, considered? Because love shouldn't feel like a mystery. It shouldn't feel like something I have to decode. If I'm loved, I should know. Not because you say it once, but because you show it daily. And if I ever have to keep asking myself whether I'm loved, that might mean I deserve a love that doesn't make me question it at all. No isn't the worst thing a girl can say, but the worst thing a girl could do is to pretend to like you or love you, get you attached, treat you like her boyfriend, and tell you she's not ready for a relationship. Shawty just played you like she's playing Animal Crossing. If there was an Olympic sport for getting played, best believe you would have gotten a gold or bronze medal. Y'all didn't even get past the talking stage. She dragged it out like this was 13 reasons why. If this was me, finding her would be as easy as trying to find the one piece. This type of disrespect is something you can't tolerate. The woman species now makes your blood boil. Talking to girls romantically is something you don't even want to hear about. This is the type of pain and heartbreak that will have you up at 3 a.m. doing 3 sets of 20 push-ups while thinking of ways to change your life around. This is the type of pain that makes you want to get rich and conquer the world. After this type of foolery, she might have turned you nonchalant. Now every girl you meet after her suffers. It's like she broke the way you loved and trusted. This is honestly most of us guys' lore. A lot of us aren't born nonchalant. It's usually someone who makes us feel that we we need to be this way, to protect ourselves from the way we were once hurt. This is why I always say don't give away your love and your heart too soon. Then it could all be a game of poker, and these girls are waiting for you to show your hand so they can crush you and take you for everything you have. After that kind of situation, you don't just move on like nothing happened. People act like you can just charge it to the game, but that game took something from you. It took the version of you that believed words matched actions. It took the version of you that assumed consistency meant interest, that effort meant intention. And once that's gone, it doesn't come back easily. You start noticing the shift in yourself. You don't text first as much anymore. You hesitate before opening up. Compliments feel suspicious. Affection feels temporary. You're no longer asking, do I like her? You're asking, is this even real? And that question follows you into every new connection, even with people who haven't done anything wrong. That's the unfair part. One person plays with your feelings, and suddenly everyone after them has to deal with the damage. You become guarded, distant, almost emotionally lazy, not because you don't care, but because caring once cost you too much. You learn that giving your heart too early can turn into a lesson you never asked for. And late at night, that's when it really hits. When the distractions are gone, when you're alone with your thoughts, that's when the anger shows up, not just at her, but at yourself, for ignoring the red flags, for believing potential instead of patterns, for staying when deep down something felt off. That anger fuels change, but it can also harden you if you're not careful. A lot of guys turn that pain into motivation. Gym sessions at ungodly hours, obsessing over goals, wanting to level up in every area of life. And while growth is good, it's important to recognize where it's coming from. Are you improving because you want more for yourself? Because you're trying to prove you were worth choosing? That experience becomes part of your story, your lore, not to victimize you, but to explain why you move the way you do now, why you don't fall as fast, why you keep your guard up, why you test people before trusting them. You weren't born this way. Someone taught you to protect yourself. And the real lesson isn't to stop loving. It's to stop giving your heart to people who haven't earned access to it yet. What really messes with you is realizing she probably didn't think it was that deep. To her, it was just talking, just vibes, just something to pass the time. But to you, it was hope. It was imagination. It was planning things in your head you never even said out loud. And that imbalance is where the damage happens. One person is casually passing time, the other is slowly building attachment. You replay moments looking for answers. The good mornings, the late replies that still felt warm, the way she acted like she cared without ever committing to it, and you start asking yourself if you imagined it all, if you read too much into things, if you're the problem for feeling deeply in a world where people stay shallow on purpose. That's when trust starts cracking, not just trust in others, but trust in yourself. You stop believing your intuition because last time it led you straight into disappointment. So now you second guess everything. Is she flirting or just being nice? Does she actually like me or just like the attention? You become hyper aware, constantly scanning for signs that history is about to repeat itself. And the worst part is how it rewires your expectations. You go into new situations already bracing for impact, already assuming it won't last, already preparing for the moment they pull back and say they're not ready. So instead of enjoying the present, you're always waiting for the drop, always half gone even when you're still there. This is how people become emotionally unavailable without meaning to, not because they don't want love, but because love once felt like a setup, like something that was offered just to be taken away. So you start protecting yourself in quiet ways. You don't get excited too fast, you don't express how much you care. You keep things surface level until someone proves they're different. But here's the truth, nobody tells you. What happened to you wasn't weakness. It was sincerity, meeting someone who didn't know what they wanted. And that doesn't mean you should stop being sincere. It just means you have to be more selective with who you give that version of yourself to. After that kind of situation, something shifts in you. You're not loud about it, you don't announce it, but you feel it in the way you move. You stop leading with your heart and start leading with caution. You don't text first as much. You don't double text. You don't let yourself get excited over potential anymore. You tell yourself it's maturity, but deep down, it's fear wearing a calmer face. You start believing that caring less is safer, that being detached is smarter, that if you never let anyone get too close, they can't pull the rug from under you again. So you keep people at arm's length, you flirt without intention, you talk without expectation, you convince yourself this is control, but really it's armor. And sometimes you miss the old you, the version of you that loved freely, that didn't overthink every reply, that didn't feel embarrassed for being excited about someone. You miss how deeply you used to feel before it backfired. You don't know how to go back without risking the same pain again. That's how one situation can bleed into every future one. You start punishing people who haven't done anything wrong yet, not intentionally but subconsciously. You assume they'll leave, assume they'll switch up, assume they'll say they're not ready once you get attached, so you stay one step ahead emotionally, just in case. And the scary part is how normalized this becomes. People praise you for being nonchalant, for not caring too much, for being unbothered. They don't see the nights you still replay things in your head. They don't see how guarded you've become. They don't see how badly you still want something real, even though you act like you don't. But here's the part you need to hear. Becoming colder isn't healing, it's surviving. And survival is not the same as growth. You didn't lose because you cared. You lost because you cared about someone who wasn't capable of matching it. One day, someone will come into your life and your walls will confuse them. They'll feel the distance, they'll wonder why you hesitate, and you'll have to decide whether you're going to keep letting the past decide how you love, or whether you're ready to risk feeling again, this time with someone who actually means it. Here's the truth nobody really prepares you for. The hardest part isn't getting played, it's what happens after, when you meet someone new who actually treats you right, and you don't know how to receive it. Their consistency feels suspicious. Their interest feels too good to be true. When they text back fast instead of feeling secure, your mind starts asking, what's the catch? Because your brain remembers patterns, remembers how attention turned into attachment, and attachment turned into disappointment. So now every good thing feels temporary. You don't relax into love anymore, you brace for impact. You're always waiting for the switch up, the moment they pull away, the moment they say they're not ready, the moment you realize you were just another phase to them. And it's exhausting, because part of you wants to love again the way you used to. Fully, honestly, without holding back. But another part of you is screaming not to, telling you that being vulnerable is dangerous, that letting someone see you is how you get hurt, so you stay halfway in, halfway out. Enough to not be alone, but not enough to be devastated again. That's why you start confusing peace with boredom. Healthy love feels quiet compared to chaos. There's no guessing games, no mixed signals, no emotional roller coaster. And because you got used to inconsistency, stability feels unfamiliar, almost wrong. You catch yourself thinking, why isn't this hurting? Why am I not anxious? And that's when you realize how much damage was done. But healing doesn't mean you'll never be cautious again. It means learning when caution is protecting you and when it's sabotaging something good. It means unlearning the belief that love has to hurt to be real. It means reminding yourself that not everyone is playing a game, even if someone once did. You're not broken for being guarded, you're human. You adapted. Don't let one person's inability to love you properly rewrite who you are at your core, because the version of you that loved deeply wasn't weak. That version was brave, and one day when it's safe again, you'll recognize that feeling, and you'll know it's finally real. What nobody tells you is that after being hurt like that, you don't become heartless overnight. You become careful. You start analyzing everything, tone, timing, energy. You replay conversations in your head, not because you're obsessed, but because you're trying to protect yourself from ever feeling that stupid again. You promise yourself you'll never miss the signs next time. So when someone new comes around, you don't jump in. You test the waters. You pull back just to see if they'll step forward. You stop texting first, not because you don't care, but because you're scared of caring more again. You don't want to be the only one invested. You don't want to be the one waiting ever again. And sometimes that defense mechanism costs you something real. The person in front of you isn't the one who hurt you. They're not playing games. They're not keeping you around for attention. They're just trying to get to know you, but your heart doesn't know the difference yet. It's still in survival mode. You might even catch yourself pushing them away emotionally, acting distant, acting unbothered, acting like you don't care as much as you actually do, because caring openly once led to pain, and you don't want to relive that lesson. You tell yourself you're just being smart now, more mature, more controlled. Deep down, there's a part of you that misses loving without fear, and that's the conflict. You want connection, but you don't want to bleed for it. You want intimacy, but only if it doesn't cost you your peace. So you move slow, you keep walls up, you tell yourself if it's meant to be, they'll stay. And if they leave, at least you didn't give them everything. Just know this. Healing isn't about rushing back into who you were before. It's about choosing who you want to be now. Someone wiser, someone more aware, but still open, still capable of real love. Because the goal was never to become cold, it was to stop giving your warmth to people who couldn't handle it. Here's the truth. Most people never say out loud. Becoming guarded doesn't mean you lost your ability to love. It means you finally learned your worth. There's a difference. You didn't harden because you're bitter. You hardened because you had to survive something that broke you when you were genuine. You remember how freely you used to give, how you didn't hesitate, how you showed up with your whole chest. No hesitation, no backup plan. You didn't measure effort. You didn't keep score. You just loved. And when that got taken advantage of, it didn't just hurt your heart. It shook your identity. It made you question if being that open was a mistake. So now you hesitate. You don't open up right away. You don't trauma dump. You don't promise things too early. You don't let people know how deeply you feel until they've proven they're safe. And that's not weakness. That's discernment. That's growth. But sometimes people misunderstand that version of you. They call you distant, nonchalant, emotionless. They don't see the emotional discipline it took to become this way. They don't see the nights you had to teach yourself how to let go, how to sit with silence, how to stop chasing explanations that were never coming. And yeah, it gets lonely sometimes because not everyone has the patience to get past your walls. Not everyone understands that consistency matters more to you now than words. That effort means more than promises. That actions are the only language you really trust. The right person won't rush you. They won't demand access to parts of you they haven't earned. They won't punish you for protecting yourself. They'll understand that loving you means moving at your pace, showing up even when you don't ask, being steady when you're cautious. You're not broken. You're recalibrated. You didn't lose your softness. You just learned to aim it better. And one day, when someone proves they can handle your heart without hurting it, you'll feel it, because you'll want to open up again, not out of fear of losing them, but because it finally feels safe to stay. What people don't realize is that the walls you built weren't meant to keep love out. They were meant to keep the wrong people from walking in and wrecking everything again. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be distant. You became distant after explaining yourself one too many times to people who never listened, after forgiving things you never should have had to forgive, after loving someone who treated your heart like something disposable. There was a version of you that believed effort would always be met halfway, that if you just loved harder, communicated better, stayed patient longer, things would work out. And when that belief collapsed, it didn't collapse quietly. It shattered because you weren't just mourning a person, you were mourning the version of yourself that thought love was always safe. So now you watch patterns, you notice energy shifts, you pay attention to how people show up when it's inconvenient, not when it's easy. You don't get attached to potential anymore. You don't romanticize promises. You wait to see if words and actions line up, and if they don't, you detach without explaining yourself the way you used to. Some people call that cold, but it's not. It's clarity. You're tired of giving the benefit of the doubt to people who already showed you who they were. You're tired of staying loyal to people who only kept you around when it benefited them. You're tired of feeling stupid for caring too much, so you stopped overextending. You stopped proving. You stopped begging to be chosen. And yeah, sometimes you miss how deeply you used to feel. Sometimes you miss how excited you got, how hopeful you were. But you also remember the crash, the nights you questioned your worth, the way your chest felt heavy for weeks, the way you blamed yourself for someone else's inability to love you properly. That's why you don't rush now. That's why you don't fall fast. That's why you protect your peace like it's sacred, because you know what it costs to rebuild yourself from emotional ruins. And the truth is, the right person won't see your caution as a flaw. They'll see it as proof that you value yourself. They'll be patient enough to earn your trust, consistent enough to soften your guard, safe enough to remind you that not everyone comes to take. You're not afraid of love, you're afraid of losing yourself again. And that fear makes sense. Here's the part nobody tells you when you go through something like that. The fact that you're guarded now doesn't mean you're broken. It means you survived, it means you learned, it means you finally stopped pouring yourself into people who treated your heart like something they could pick up and put down whenever they felt like it. You didn't lose your ability to love. You just stopped giving it to people who didn't know how to hold it. Deep down, that soft version of you still exists. The one who loves deeply, the one who shows up, the one who means what they say and stays when things get uncomfortable. You didn't kill that part of yourself. You just hid it, locked it away until someone proves they're safe enough to see it again. And that's growth, because love isn't about giving everything immediately anymore. It's about watching how someone treats your time, your effort, your vulnerability. It's about noticing if they stay consistent when there's nothing to gain, if they choose you when it's inconvenient, if they respect your boundaries instead of testing how far they can push them. You're not asking for perfection now. You're asking for honesty, for effort that doesn't disappear, for reassurance that doesn't feel forced, for a connection that doesn't make you feel anxious, confused, or small. And the right person won't make you feel like you have to guard yourself forever. They won't rush you. They won't pressure you to open up faster than you're ready. They'll understand why you hesitate, why you question, why you move slower than before, because they won't see your past as baggage. They'll see it as context. One day, Someone will come into your life, and instead of triggering your fears, they'll quiet them. Instead of making you overthink, they'll bring peace. Instead of making you feel like you have to protect yourself, they'll make you feel protected. Until then, it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to walk away faster. It's okay to protect your heart. You're not cold. You're not heartless. You're just done bleeding for people who never planned to stay. And when love comes again, it won't break you, because this time, you know your worth. I know hopeless romantic sounds naive to some people, like it means you don't understand how the world works, but that's not true. A hopeless romantic isn't someone who ignores reality. It's someone who sees it clearly and still chooses love anyway. It's knowing how badly love can hurt and still believing it's worth it. I don't believe in love because I think it's easy. I believe in it because I know how rare it is when it's real. Being a hopeless romantic means you don't just want someone, you want connection. You want the kind of love where attention doesn't wander, where effort isn't forced, where choosing each other feels natural, not strategic. You want late night talks that don't feel rushed, silence that feels comfortable, inside jokes no one else understands. You want to build a world with one person and let the rest fade into the background. And yeah, you know the risk. You know love can leave scars. You know it can change you. You know it can take pieces of you that don't come back the same. But being a hopeless romantic means you'd rather feel deeply than live safely. You don't want love that's casual. You don't want to act detached. You don't want to pretend you wouldn't be devastated to lose someone you care about. You want to care. You want to choose someone fully and mean it. No exits, no backups, no pretending you're less invested than you are. And that's what makes it hard sometimes, because the world rewards indifference. It praises being unbothered. It treats emotional distance like maturity. So when you show up soft, present, intentional, people call you too much, but you're not too much. You're just not built for shallow love. A hopeless romantic doesn't love this way because they're weak. They love this way because they're brave enough to risk being hurt for something that actually matters. You're not chasing a fantasy. You're chasing alignment. The kind of love that feels steady, not chaotic, intense but safe, deep but mutual. And even if it takes longer, even if you have to wait, even if you get hurt along the way, you don't regret loving like this, because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. So no, you won't grow out of it. You won't harden. You won't stop wanting something real. You're a hopeless romantic because you refuse to let the world convince you that love should be shallow, casual, or disposable. And one day, someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your softness. They won't flinch at your depth. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it, and that's when you'll realize you were never hopeless. You were just holding out for something worth believing in. Being a hopeless romantic doesn't mean you believe love will save you. It means you believe it's worth showing up for. It means you don't enter connections casually. You don't date out of boredom. You don't give your heart halfway just to say you tried. When you love, you mean it. You pay attention. You remember small things. You imagine futures without realizing you're doing it. Not because you're delusional, but because that's how your mind works. You see potential where others see risk, and you know that scares people. Some people love with limits, with conditions, with an exit already planned. You don't. You love with the intention to stay if it's right. That's why breakups hit you harder. That's why disappointment lingers longer. That's why you take time to heal. Because when you commit emotionally, you don't do it lightly. People tell you to protect your heart, to be less invested, to stop giving so much. But they don't understand. Loving deeply isn't something you can switch off. It's how you experience the world. You feel things fully. Music hits harder, memories stick longer, connection means more, and yes, that makes life heavier sometimes, but it also makes it meaningful. You don't want love that feels replaceable. You don't want someone who treats you like an option among many. You want to be chosen the same way you choose, intentionally, fully, without hesitation. And until that exists, you'd rather be alone than half present in something shallow. That's the part people miss. A hopeless romantic isn't desperate for love. They're selective. They'd rather wait than cheapen the way they love just to fit in. So when you say you're a hopeless romantic, what you really mean is you still believe connection matters, you still believe loyalty is rare, you still believe love should feel like home, not like a negotiation. And even after heartbreak, after disappointment, after learning how badly love can hurt, you don't shut down, you slow down, you heal, you keep your heart intact, because the world already has enough people who don't care. What it doesn't have enough of are people willing to love honestly without pretending it's easy. And that's not weakness, that's conviction. Being a hopeless romantic isn't about expecting perfection. It's about refusing to treat love like something disposable. It's knowing that connection is rare and not watering it down just to seem unaffected. You don't fall for people easily, but when you do, it's intentional. You don't love out of loneliness, you love out of recognition. There's a moment where you see someone, not just who they are, but who they could be with you, and something in you locks in, not obsession, not fantasy, commitment, and that's where people misunderstand you. They think you're idealizing, they think you're rushing, they think you're setting yourself up to get hurt, but what they don't see is how much restraint it takes to love like this in a world that treats feelings like liabilities. You know how badly it can go. You've felt the disappointment, the silence, the slow realization that someone didn't choose you the way you chose them, and still, you don't turn cold, you don't reduce love to strategy, you don't keep score, you don't enter connections with a backup plan. Because loving halfway feels worse to you than losing someone you loved fully. You want the kind of love that's unmistakable, where effort doesn't fluctuate, where intentions don't need decoding, where loyalty isn't treated like something rare or surprising. You want love that's steady, not loud, not chaotic, not anxiety disguised as excitement, just real. And yes, that means you get hurt deeper, because when you love, you're all the way in. You don't protect yourself by caring less. You protect yourself by choosing carefully. That's the difference. A hopeless romantic isn't reckless. They're discerning. They'd rather be alone than share space with someone who makes them feel like they're asking for too much just by wanting honesty, effort, and presence. And if that means waiting longer, so be it. Because you're not waiting for attention. You're waiting for alignment. For someone who doesn't flinch at your depth, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't need you to tone it down to make things easier. Someone who sees the way you love and says, good, I do too. So no, you won't stop being a hopeless romantic, not because you haven't learned, but because you've learned exactly what it costs and you've decided it's still worth it. Being a hopeless romantic means you don't know how to love a little. You either feel it or you don't. And when you feel it, it changes the way you move. You start noticing the small things, the way someone texts you when they're busy, the way they remember what you said weeks ago, the way they look at you when you're not trying, and you don't call that doing too much, you call that real. But the world tries to train that out of you. It tells you to be chill, to act like you don't care, to keep your feelings locked up until someone earns them. So you try to play that role, you try to be distant, try to be casual, try to treat love like it's just another thing, and it never works, because that's not who you are. You don't want a connection where you're constantly guessing. You don't want to be with someone who makes loyalty feel rare. You don't want a love that only shows up when it's convenient. You want the kind of love that feels chosen, not maybe, not we'll see, not I'm not sure, chosen. And sometimes that's what makes it lonely, because you keep meeting people who like the attention, but don't respect the intention. People who love the way you make them feel, but don't want to carry the responsibility of caring back, so you end up doing the hardest thing for someone like you. You walk away, not because you stopped loving, but because you finally realized love shouldn't require you to beg for consistency. A hopeless romantic doesn't stay where they're confused. They don't keep giving their heart to someone who treats it like something optional. They'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone, and that's not weakness, that's standards. Because if you love deeply, you have to protect that depth, not by becoming cold, but by becoming honest about what you need, and what you need is simple: presence, effort, loyalty, clarity. The kind of love that doesn't make you question yourself for wanting something real. What hurts the most as a hopeless romantic isn't rejection. It's realizing someone enjoyed being loved by you, but never intended to love you the same way. They liked the attention, the consistency, the way you showed up without hesitation, but when it came time to match that energy, to choose you with the same certainty, they hesitated, and that hesitation sticks with you because you don't love casually, you don't give pieces of yourself without meaning to. So when someone accepts your love without offering clarity in return, it feels like betrayal, even if they never promised anything. That's the quiet pain of being a hopeless romantic. You assume people love the way you do, with intention, with follow-through, with the understanding that feelings carry weight, and when they don't, you start questioning yourself. Am I asking for too much? Am I moving too fast? Am I wrong for wanting something solid? But the truth is, you weren't wrong. You were just loving someone who didn't have the same capacity. Some people like being cared for more than they like caring back. They want the benefits of your depth without the responsibility of meeting it, and learning that forces you to grow. Not by loving less, but by loving smarter. You start paying attention to actions, to consistency, to whether someone shows up when it's easy and when it's inconvenient. You stop pouring into people who only give when it suits them, not because you've become colder, but because you've learned your heart isn't something everyone deserves access to. Being a hopeless romantic doesn't mean you accept crumbs. It means you believe in love enough to walk away when it's not being returned honestly. And that's the part people don't see. Your softness comes with strength, your depth comes with discernment, because loving deeply also means knowing when to stop. Being a hopeless romantic means waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept love that's almost right. They grow quieter, they grow distant, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you know that could never be you. You don't want a relationship that slowly drains you. You don't want love that feels like compromise from the very beginning. So you wait, not because you think you're better than anyone else, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you attach, how fully you commit, how once your heart is in, it doesn't wander. And you also know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. It gets taken for granted, it gets tested, it gets stretched until it starts hurting more than it should. So patience becomes protection. You don't rush intimacy. You don't force connection. You let people show you who they are before you give them access to who you are. That's not fear. That's wisdom earned the hard way. Some days the waiting feels heavy. You watch people pair off quickly. You hear about relationships that just happened. You wonder if maybe you're overthinking things, but deep down you know the truth. You're not waiting for attention. You're waiting for alignment, for someone who doesn't flinch when things get real, who doesn't pull back when feelings deepen, who doesn't treat commitment like a loss of freedom. You want someone who stays present, who chooses you clearly, who doesn't make you question whether you're asking for too much, because to you, love isn't supposed to feel confusing. It's supposed to feel steady, and until that exists, being alone is still better than being half-loved. That's the quiet strength of being a hopeless romantic. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't lower your standards just to say you're not alone. You wait, not because you're hopeless, but because you believe the right love won't require you to betray yourself. People like you feel things more intensely, not because you're dramatic, but because you're present. When something matters to you, it doesn't sit quietly in the background, it moves through you, it stays with you. Love doesn't just pass through your life, it marks it. That's why moments linger longer, why memories feel heavier, why connections don't fade easily once they've mattered. And People tell you that's a problem. They say you should care less, detach quicker, move on faster. But they don't understand what intensity really is. Intensity isn't chaos, it isn't instability, it isn't losing control. It's depth. It's the ability to feel joy fully and grief honestly, to experience connection without numbing yourself just to make it easier. You don't skim life, you dive into it. And that's why love feels different to you than it does to most people. You don't forget easily, you don't replace people quickly, you don't treat connection like something interchangeable. When you love, it's intentional. That's why heartbreak hits harder. Because you didn't hold back, you didn't love with conditions, you didn't prepare an exit in advance, you showed up honestly. And while that hurts more in the moment, it also means something important. Nothing about your love was fake. You don't look back wondering if you tried hard enough, if you cared enough, if you were too guarded. You know you gave what you had, and that kind of certainty matters. Intensity becomes a problem only when it's given to the wrong people. With the right person, your depth won't feel overwhelming, it'll feel grounding. They won't ask you to tone it down. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't treat your feelings like something they need to manage. They'll meet you there, because the truth is the world doesn't need fewer people who feel deeply. It needs more people who aren't afraid to. And being a hopeless romantic means you refuse to apologize for having a heart that actually shows up. At some point, you learn how to guard your heart without becoming guarded. That's a hard balance for someone like you, because you don't want to turn cold. You don't want to love halfway. You don't want to build walls so high that nothing real can get in. But you also know what happens when you give too much, too soon, to someone who doesn't know how to hold it. So you change, not by loving less, but by loving slower. You stop giving access before effort is proven. You stop filling in the gaps when someone shows you inconsistency. You stop romanticizing potential over behavior, and that doesn't feel natural at first, because you're used to leading with your heart, used to giving people the benefit of the doubt, used to assuming good intentions. But experience teaches you something important. Being open doesn't mean being unprotected. You can still be warm without being available to everyone. You can still be deep without drowning in the wrong places. So you watch, you listen, you notice who shows up consistently and who only appears when it's convenient. You let people reveal themselves instead of rushing to explain them. And that's when your love becomes safer, not smaller. You're still a hopeless romantic. You still believe in connection. You still want that kind of love where effort feels mutual and presence feels natural. But now, you don't mistake interest for intention. You don't confuse words with commitment. You don't chase clarity, you wait to see it. And that patience isn't fear, it's respect for yourself, because you finally understand that the right person won't need you to rush your heart to keep them close. They'll move at a pace that protects what you're building together. And when you feel that, you won't have to second guess it. You'll know. There's a phase every hopeless romantic goes through that feels especially isolating. It's the part where you've learned enough to stop choosing the wrong people, but you haven't met the right one yet. So you're not heartbroken anymore. You're not chasing. You're not settling. You're just alone, and people don't understand that version of you. They assume you've become distant, that you've lost interest, that you've changed, but really you've just stopped forcing connection where it doesn't fit. You're not closed off, you're selective, you're not cold, you're careful. You've reached a place where surface level attention doesn't move you anymore. Small talk feels hollow, inconsistent effort feels loud, mixed signals feel exhausting, so you walk away sooner, you disengage faster, you don't explain yourself as much, and that can feel lonely, because now you're surrounded by people but not met by anyone. You want depth, you want presence, you want someone who doesn't flinch when emotions enter the room, and until that shows up, nothing else feels worth your heart. This is usually the point where people tell you to lower your standards, to be more flexible, to give someone a chance, but they don't understand what it costs you to love the wrong person. They don't feel the aftermath the way you do, the way it lingers, the way it reshapes you, so you hold your ground, even when it feels quiet, even when it feels like you're the only one still believing in something deeper, because you know this loneliness is different from the loneliness you felt before. Before, you were lonely because you were giving your heart to people who couldn't hold it. Now you're lonely because you're protecting it, and that difference matters. This space isn't empty. It's the space right before alignment. The moment right before someone finally sees the way you love and doesn't ask you to soften it. And even though it's hard, even though it tests your patience, you stay here because you know the right love won't arrive while you're busy entertaining the wrong ones. Being a hopeless romantic was never about fantasy. It was about faith. Faith that connection matters, that loyalty still means something, that choosing one person fully isn't outdated, it's intentional. For a long time, you wondered if this way of loving was something you were supposed to grow out of, if heartbreak was meant to harden you, if disappointment was meant to teach you to want less, but it never did. Every time you tried to love casually, it felt wrong. Every time you tried to detach, you felt empty. Because loving deeply was never a habit you picked up, it was part of who you are. You weren't built to love halfway. You weren't meant to treat people like options. You weren't meant to keep one foot out the door just in case. And yes, that made the journey harder. You felt things more intensely. You lost futures you had already imagined. You walked away from people you still cared about because they couldn't meet you where you stood. But none of that was wasted. Every disappointment refined you. Every heartbreak taught you discernment. Every lonely stretch strengthened your standards, not so you'd love less about it to none, but so you'd love right. Now you understand something clearly. Being a hopeless romantic doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you face it and still refuse to settle. You don't want perfect love, you want present love. The kind that doesn't confuse you, the kind that doesn't require self-editing, the kind that chooses you with the same certainty you offer in return. And when that finally arrives, it won't feel overwhelming. It won't feel chaotic. It won't feel like something you have to chase. It'll feel calm, mutual, safe. You won't wonder where you stand. You won't question if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. And in that moment, everything will make sense. All the waiting, all the walking away, all the times you chose being alone over being half-loved. You weren't too much. You were just ahead of your time in a world that forgot how to love with intention. Though no, being a hopeless romantic isn't something you need to fix. It's something you protect, because when the right person finally meets you there, they won't try to change you. They'll recognize you, and you'll realize you were never hopeless at all. You were just holding out for a love that was worthy of you. It's Valentine's Day, and yeah, I'm alone. No dinner plans, no flowers. No good morning, beautiful text waiting on my phone. Just me. And for a second, it hits. You scroll and see everyone posted up. Roses, candles, soft captions about my forever. And you start wondering what it feels like to be chosen like that. Not privately, not secretly, but confidently. I won't lie, there's a quiet sting to it. Not because I need the holiday, but because it reminds you of what you don't have. It makes you question things. Am I behind? Am I unlovable? Did I miss my person somehow? But here's the part I'm learning. Being alone today doesn't mean I'm unwanted. It means I haven't settled. I could have been in something halfway. Could have forced a connection just to say I wasn't alone tonight, but I didn't, and that matters. So yeah, I'm alone, but I'm not desperate, not chasing, not pretending, just here. And maybe that's not sad. Maybe it's strength. Valentine's Day has a way of making you feel behind. Like everyone else got the memo and you didn't. You open your phone and it's everywhere. Couples at dinner, surprise gifts, long captions about my person. And even if you're strong, even if you've healed, even if you're okay most days, comparison still creeps in. You start measuring your life against highlight reels. You forget that people only post the soft parts. You forget the arguments, the doubts, the almost breakups. All you see is what you don't have. And for a minute, it makes being alone feel heavier, not because you suddenly need someone, but because the world makes it look like today is proof of something. Proof that you're chosen, proof that you're loved, proof that you made it. But here's the truth nobody posts. A relationship on Valentine's Day doesn't mean it's healthy. Flowers don't mean loyalty. A dinner reservation doesn't mean forever. And being alone doesn't mean you failed. It just means your story isn't on display today. And that's okay. There's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. And today forces you to notice it. Being alone is physical. It's no dinner plans, no shared dessert, no one reaching for your hand across the table. Lonely is emotional. Lonely is feeling unseen even when someone's sitting next to you. Lonely is being in a relationship where you still question if you matter. I've been lonely with someone before, and honestly, that felt worse than tonight, because at least now I'm not pretending. I'm not settling for half attention just to say I'm not alone. I'm not forcing conversation to avoid silence. It's just me. And yeah, sometimes that's quiet, sometimes it's heavy, but it's honest. There's no confusion here, no mixed signals, no wondering where I stand. So maybe being alone today isn't the loss I thought it was. Maybe it's just space for something real instead of something convenient. Let's be real. There's always that moment where you think about texting someone, not because you miss them, not because you want them back, but because you don't want to feel alone tonight. You scroll, you hover over a name, you think, it's just a harmless message, just a hey, just what are you up to? Just something to fill the silence. And for a second, your pride and your loneliness argue, because attention is easy to get. Connection isn't. You could text the almost, the ex, the person who only shows up when it's convenient, and maybe they'd respond. Maybe they'd even make you feel wanted for a few hours. But tomorrow, you'd wake up right back in the same place, because you didn't want them, you wanted distraction. And there's a difference. So instead of reaching for temporary comfort, you sit with the quiet. You choose not to reopen doors that were closed for a reason. You choose not to trade peace for short-term validation. And that choice, that's growth. Being alone tonight doesn't mean you're desperate. It means you're disciplined. There was a time this day would have broken me. I would have taken it personally, like it was proof that I wasn't enough. I would have blamed myself, wondered what I needed to fix, compared my timeline to everyone else's like love was some kind of race. But it doesn't hit like that anymore because I understand something now. Being single on Valentine's Day isn't a reflection of my worth, it's a reflection of my standards. I could have rushed into something, ignored red flags, stayed with someone who didn't choose me fully just so I wouldn't be alone today. But I didn't, and that's growth. This day doesn't control my value. It doesn't define my desirability. It doesn't measure my future. It's just a date on a calendar. And yeah, sometimes it still stings a little, but it doesn't shake me, because I'd rather spend one day alone than spend months with someone who makes me feel unseen. And that shift, that's peace. Spending Valentine's Day alone actually teaches you something. You learn who you are without someone validating you. There's no us to hide behind, no relationship status to lean on, no public display to prove you're wanted. It's just you, and that can feel exposing. Because when the noise dies down, you're left with your own thoughts. You start asking yourself, am I really okay? Am I lonely or just uncomfortable? Do I want love, or do I just hate feeling left out? And those questions matter, because being alone forces honesty. You realize you don't just want a relationship, you want the right one. Not someone to post, not someone to text for the night, not someone to fill space. You want something steady, intentional, real. And sitting alone tonight proves something important. You're willing to wait. You're willing to protect your peace. You're willing to sit through temporary discomfort instead of choosing permanent misalignment. That's not weakness, that's maturity. Valentine's Day alone doesn't mean you're lacking. It means you're not settling. Let's talk about self-love, but not the cliche version. Not the bubble baths. Not the, I don't need anyone speeches. Not pretending you're perfectly fine 24/7. Real self-love is quieter than that. It's not about convincing yourself you don't want love. It's about refusing to accept less just because you want it. It's choosing not to text someone who only values you when they're bored. It's not lowering your standards just to avoid feeling left out tonight. It's sitting in the discomfort without betraying yourself. Self-love isn't loud confidence. Sometimes it's discipline. It's saying, I deserve something real, even when being alone feels heavy. It's acknowledging, I want to be loved without shaming yourself for it. Because wanting love doesn't make you weak. Settling does. So if you're alone today, that doesn't mean you failed at self-love. It might mean you're finally practicing. There's a quiet strength in being single in a world that glorifies couples. Everything is marketed around us. Dinner for two, matching gifts, shared experiences, and when you're alone, it can feel like you're standing outside of something everyone else was invited to. But here's what people don't talk about. It takes strength to not force a relationship just to fit in. It takes strength to say, I'd rather wait in a culture that says, just take what you can get. Being single isn't a flaw. It's not a delay. It's not a sign you're unwanted. Sometimes it's a sign you refuse to compromise your standards for temporary comfort. There's power in knowing you're not with someone just to avoid this day. There's power in walking into restaurants alone without feeling embarrassed, and going home to yourself without feeling incomplete, because your worth was never meant to be measured by who's sitting next to you. And the strongest thing you can do is stand alone without shrinking. Maybe the season of being alone isn't punishment, maybe it's preparation. Because when you're by yourself, you learn things you don't learn in relationships. You learn your triggers, your patterns, your standards. You learn what you actually want without someone else influencing it. Being alone gives you clarity. Clarity about what you won't tolerate. Clarity about what makes you feel safe. Clarity about the difference between attention and intention. And maybe that clarity is building something in you. Patience, discernment, emotional discipline. So when something real does show up, you won't grab it out of fear. You won't cling to it out of loneliness. You won't confuse it with the first person who makes you feel seen. You'll recognize it calmly because you'll know the difference between desperation and alignment. Maybe this Valentine's Day alone isn't a sign you're behind. Maybe it's proof you're becoming someone who won't settle. And that kind of growth doesn't always look romantic, but it lasts. At the end of the day, I'm still alone. No dramatic plot twist, no last-minute confession, no surprise flowers at my door, just me. But it doesn't feel heavy anymore, because being alone today didn't expose a flaw in me. It exposed my discipline. I didn't text someone out of boredom. I didn't settle just to post something. I didn't force a connection to avoid the silence. I chose peace, and that choice matters more than a dinner reservation ever could. Valentine's Day used to feel like proof that I was missing something. Now it feels like proof that I'm protecting something. My standards, my growth, my future. Because when love does come, I don't want it to be rushed. I don't want it to be convenient. I don't want it to be temporary. I want it to be real. So if that means spending this day alone instead of in something halfway, I'm okay with that. Being alone tonight doesn't mean I'm unloved. It means I'm waiting for something worth loving, and that's not sad. That's strength. Sometimes the question isn't, will I be loved? It's quieter than that. It's, is there something about me that makes love harder? Because when people keep leaving or hesitating or choosing someone else, you start internalizing it. You start wondering if maybe you're too intense, too emotional, too independent, too complicated, or maybe not enough of something, and no one ever says it directly. They just drift, they just lose interest, they just aren't ready, and you're left holding the pattern. So you sit there thinking, if I was easier to love, would they have stayed? Maybe you're not hard to love. Maybe you're just hard to manipulate, hard to breadcrumb, hard to keep around without effort, hard to confuse. And to the wrong people, that feels inconvenient. You ask questions, you want clarity, You don't pretend you're okay with half effort. That doesn't make you difficult, it makes you aware. But when you keep encountering people who aren't ready for depth, your standards start to feel like flaws. You start thinking, maybe if I needed less, maybe if I expected less, maybe if I was more chill, they would have stayed. But staying isn't the goal. Staying right is. And being easy to love often just means being easy to neglect. You're not hard to love, you're just not built for temporary. When rejection repeats itself, you stop seeing it as coincidence. You start seeing it as confirmation. Confirmation that maybe you're too much, too sensitive, too deep, too intense for people to handle long term. So you adjust, you soften your reactions, you downplay your needs, you act less invested than you actually are, because maybe if you seem lighter, less emotional, less attached, they won't leave. But here's what really happens. You slowly disconnect from yourself. You become quieter in relationships, less expressive, less honest about what you want. And when someone still walks away, it hurts even more, because now it feels like even the edited version of you wasn't enough. That's when the question gets louder. If even my smaller version isn't chosen, what does that say about me? But maybe it doesn't say anything about you. Maybe it says something about who you've been choosing. There's a difference between being hard to love and being hard to access. Hard to love sounds like a flaw, like you're difficult, complicated, too much work. Hard to access is different. It means not everyone gets the deepest parts of you. It means you don't open up instantly. It means your vulnerability isn't handed out casually. And that's not a weakness, that's discernment. You don't let just anyone in anymore. You don't overshare with people who haven't earned trust. You don't attach quickly just because there's chemistry. To someone who wants easy, that feels frustrating. To someone who wants depth, that feels rare. You're not hard to love, you're just not available for surface level connection. And the wrong people will always call that too much, but the right person, they'll call it intentional. Maybe the real issue was never that you're hard to love. Maybe you've been loving people who don't know how to love deeply. There's a difference. Some people like the idea of you, your attention, your softness, the way you show up for them. But when it's time to reciprocate, they struggle, not because you're asking for too much, but because they don't have that depth to give. And instead of admitting that, it's easier for them to label you. Too intense, too emotional, too serious. But wanting clarity isn't intense, wanting effort isn't emotional, wanting something real isn't serious, it's healthy. You're not hard to love, you're hard to half love, and that's where the tension comes from. Because people who operate casually feel pressure around someone who operates intentionally, but pressure isn't the same as incompatibility. It's just misalignment. When you're repeatedly misunderstood, you start questioning your depth. You start wondering if you feel too much, if you expect too much, if you interpret things too deeply. Because when people keep saying, it's not that serious, or you're overthinking, you begin to shrink your instincts, you second guess your reactions, you silence your intuition, you tell yourself to calm down even when something feels off. But here's the truth. Depth feels dramatic to people who live on the surface. Emotional awareness feels intense to people who avoid vulnerability. Your ability to feel deeply is not a flaw, it's a capacity. And just because someone doesn't meet you there doesn't mean you're too much. It just means they don't swim that far. You're not hard to love. You're just not built for shallow connections. And that's not something you should dilute. At some point, the question changes. It stops being, am I hard to love? And starts being, are they capable of loving me properly? That shift is everything, because instead of dissecting yourself, you start observing them. Can they communicate clearly? Can they handle vulnerability? Can they stay consistent when things get real? Or do they pull away the moment depth shows up? You stop assuming you're the problem. You start noticing patterns. Some people love casually, some people love conditionally. Some people love only when it's convenient. And if you love intentionally, those dynamics will always clash. You're not hard to love. You're just not compatible with people who aren't emotionally available. And once you realize that, you stop shrinking, you stop softening your standards, you stop apologizing for wanting clarity, Because love isn't supposed to feel like convincing someone, it's supposed to feel mutual. What if being hard to love actually means you're built for something rare? Rare love isn't rushed, it isn't casual, it isn't convenient, it's intentional. And intentional love requires emotional maturity, self-awareness, consistency. Not everyone has that. So when someone meets you and realizes they can't show up fully, it's easier for them to say you're too much than admit they're not ready. Rare things aren't accessible to everyone. Depth isn't for everyone. Loyalty isn't for everyone. Emotional honesty isn't for everyone. You're not hard to love, you're selective. And selective love filters out people who only wanted access, not responsibility. You don't need someone who loves lightly. You need someone who loves intentionally. And that kind of love was never going to come from everyone anyway. At some point, you stop fearing the label. You stop trying to prove you're easy. You stop trying to shrink your depth. You stop trying to soften your standards. If loving you requires clarity, effort, and consistency, then that's the requirement, not an apology. You don't dilute your emotions anymore. You don't pretend you're fine with surface level. You don't act detached just to seem low maintenance. You embrace it. Yes, you love deeply. Yes, you need communication. Yes, you value stability. That doesn't make you difficult. It makes you intentional. And when you stop treating your depth like a flaw, you stop attracting people who are intimidated by it, because confidence changes your energy. You're not asking, is this too much? Like, you're asking, can they meet me here? And if they can't, you don't internalize it. You understand that not everyone is equipped for the kind of love you offer, and that's okay. So, am I hard to love? No, I'm just not easy to half love. I don't do confusion. I don't thrive on inconsistency. I don't mistake potential for commitment anymore. If loving me requires effort, that's because I give effort. If loving me requires honesty, that's because I offer honesty. If loving me requires depth, that's because I refuse to stay shallow. I used to think I needed to soften, to be less emotional, less aware, less intense, but the right love won't ask me to shrink. It won't call my standards too much. It won't label my needs as dramatic. It won't feel overwhelmed by my depth. It will meet it. So no, I'm not hard to love. I'm just built for someone who loves intentionally, someone who doesn't hesitate, someone who doesn't compare, someone who doesn't need convincing. And until that shows up, I'm not a problem to fix. I'm just not available for less. And that's not being hard to love. That's knowing exactly how I deserve to be loved. Being the introvert in the relationship means loving someone who lives louder than you do. They talk easily, they fill rooms, they connect fast, and you listen, you observe. You need quiet to recharge after loving hard. Sometimes it feels like you're standing next to someone who shines effortlessly while you glow quietly. They want to go out, you want to stay in, they gain energy from people, you lose it even when you're happy. And the hardest part is not the difference. It's wondering if your quiet way of loving is enough. Because you don't always say everything, you don't always show excitement loudly, but when you choose someone, you choose them deeply. Being the introvert doesn't mean you love less. It means you love in a way that's calm, steady, and intentional, and sometimes that gets misunderstood. Being with an extrovert means watching them move through the world with ease. They make friends everywhere, they're invited everywhere, people are drawn to them naturally, and sometimes, standing next to that, you wonder where you fit, not because they make you feel small, but because you don't take up space the same way. They thrive in crowds. You count the minutes until you can recharge. They talk things out loud. You process everything internally first, and there are moments where you feel guilty for needing quiet after a long day of loving them. You worry that asking for space sounds like distance, that needing alone time sounds like disinterest, but the truth is, your silence isn't absence. It's how you stay present without burning out. Loving loudly isn't the only way to love deeply, and being quieter doesn't mean you're less committed. It just means your love lives in steadiness, not spotlight. The unspoken fear is that one day you won't be enough, that they'll want more noise, more people, more energy than you can give. You worry they'll mistake your calm for boredom, your need for quiet for distance. You love them deeply but not loudly, and sometimes you wonder if that difference will matter too much. You don't compete for attention, you don't need constant stimulation, you just want connection that feels safe and real. The fear isn't that they'll leave, it's that they'll outgrow you without realizing you were loving them in the only way that feels honest to you. But loving quietly doesn't mean loving less. It means choosing them without the performance. It means staying without needing the room to notice. The right partner won't need you to be louder, they'll need you to be you. Introverts love deeply in ways that aren't always obvious. You remember details, you notice shifts in mood, you feel things before they're said. While they're talking to the room, you're paying attention to them. You're the one who listens after the party ends, the one who creates calm when everything feels loud, the one who offers presence instead of constant stimulation. Your love shows up in consistency, not volume, in choosing the same person again and again, even when it's quiet, even when no one's watching. And often your extroverted partner doesn't realize how much they need that until life gets overwhelming, until they're tired, until the noise fades, until they need someone who knows how to stay still with them. That's when your kind of love becomes the anchor. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. Introverts and extroverts can work beautifully together, but only when both ways of loving are respected. You don't need to become louder to be enough for them, and they don't need to become quieter to be right for you. What matters is understanding that your need for space isn't rejection, that their need for people isn't avoidance. You recharge differently, but you can still meet in the middle. When an extrovert learns that quiet isn't distance, and an introvert learns that excitement isn't chaos, something soft happens. You stop trying to fix each other, you start protecting each other, you give them grounding, they give you expansion, and suddenly, the difference that once felt like a risk becomes the balance that makes the relationship work. Asking for space doesn't mean you love them less. It means you know yourself. Introverts don't pull away to create distance. They pull away to come back whole. But asking for that space can feel heavy. You worry it sounds like rejection. You worry they'll take it personally. You worry needing time alone makes you difficult to love. The right partner won't hear, "I need space," as "I don't want you." They'll hear it as, "I'm taking care of myself so I can show up better." You don't need to apologize for how you recharge. You don't need to explain it every time. Love doesn't require constant closeness to be real. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is step back for a moment, not to disconnect, but to return as yourself. Introverts show love in quiet, steady ways. You remember the little things they forget they mentioned. You notice when their mood shifts before they say anything. You check in without being asked. Your love isn't loud. It's consistent. It's making space for them after a long day. It's choosing them in calm moments, not just exciting ones. It's staying present when things slow down. Sometimes you wish they could see it more clearly. Not because you need praise, but because your love doesn't always announce itself. But the right partner will feel it. They'll feel it in how safe they are with you, and how calm things get around you, and how you stay, even when nothing exciting is happening. Quiet love isn't invisible. It's just not performing, and the people who value depth will always recognize it. It's easy to compare yourself to an extroverted partner, to wonder why you don't light up rooms, why you don't want constant plans, why loving quietly feels like a disadvantage. But your quiet nature isn't something to fix, it's something that brings balance. You offer depth in a world of noise, you offer presence in a world of distraction, you offer steadiness when everything else feels fast. You don't compete for attention, you create connection, and when you stop comparing, something shifts. You stop shrinking next to their energy. You stop questioning your value. You stop feeling like you need to match them to be worthy of love. You realize your calm isn't less than their excitement. It's what gives the relationship somewhere to rest. And the right partner won't ask you to be louder. They'll thank you for being grounding. One of the quiet fears is being replaced by louder energy, by someone more outgoing, more exciting, more effortless in social spaces. You worry that your calm won't be enough forever. But the truth is, people don't stay for volume. They stay for how they feel when everything slows down. An extroverted partner may enjoy attention, but they rest in safety. They recharge in understanding. They stay where they feel accepted without having to perform, and that's where you shine. You offer a place where they don't have to impress anyone, where they can be tired, where they can be real. Loud energy is easy to find, steady presence is not, and the partner who truly values you won't look for replacement. They'll recognize that your quiet way of loving is exactly what makes the relationship feel secure. Being the introvert was never a disadvantage. It just doesn't announce itself. Your love lasts because it isn't fueled by excitement alone. It's built on presence on listening, on staying when things are quiet and ordinary. You don't love for the room, you love for the person, and that kind of love doesn't fade when the noise does. The right partner won't ask you to be louder, faster, or different. They'll appreciate that with you. Love feels steady instead of overwhelming, safe instead of performative. So if you've ever felt like your quiet nature made you harder to love, it didn't. It made you the place someone can finally rest. And that's not less, that's rare. Loving quietly doesn't mean loving halfway. It means you choose depth over display. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most meaningful presence in someone's life. The right partner won't measure love by energy levels. They'll feel it in consistency, in safety, in how calm it feels to be with you. And one day you'll realize something simple. Your quiet wasn't something they had to tolerate. It was the reason they felt at home. It's always at night when everything hits at once. Your room gets quiet, your phone is dry, everyone's asleep, and suddenly your mind keeps replaying everything. You try to forget the laughs, the old texts, the what-ifs. You start missing people you swore you moved on from. You start feeling things you buried a long time ago. And it's not even about wanting them back. It's about wishing things just ended differently. Wishing you said more or nothing at all. You ever lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like the past is louder than the present? It's like Aaron from Attack on Titan, haunted by the weight of what's already gone, but still pretending to move forward like it doesn't hurt. And the worst part? You can't talk to anyone about it because it's 2 a.m., and no one would get it anyway. But let me remind you this. Those memories, they're just echoes. They feel loud now, but they don't define you. You lived through them and you're still here, and yeah, it hurts, but that means you cared. And caring, that's not weakness. That's proof you're human. So breathe. You won't feel like this forever. It always gets heavier at night. Not during the day when there's noise, distractions, people moving around. It's when everything finally shuts off. When your room is still, your phone hasn't buzzed in hours, and the world feels like it forgot about you. That's when your thoughts stop waiting their turn. Your mind starts pulling things out of storage you didn't ask for. Old conversations, screenshots you never deleted, moments you thought you were over until they show up uninvited. Tell yourself you've moved on, and maybe you have. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It just means learning how to live with what still lingers. You don't even want them back. That's the confusing part. You just wish things had ended cleaner, wish you explained yourself better, or maybe wish you stayed quiet instead of saying too much. You replay scenarios that can't be fixed, trying to rewrite endings that are already locked in. You lie there staring at the ceiling, feeling like the past is louder than the life you're living right now, like everything that mattered before is screaming for attention, while the present barely whispers. You wonder why it still affects you, why it still sneaks up on you when you thought you were stronger than this. And the worst part is the timing. Too late to text anyone, too late to explain how heavy your chest feels, too late to ask for reassurance without feeling dramatic. So you just sit with it, alone, letting it hit you in waves. It's like carrying something invisible all day, and at night you finally feel the full weight of it. You act fine, you move forward, but inside, there's still grief for versions of life that never happened, for people who changed, for moments that ended before you were ready. But here's what matters. Those memories aren't commands, they're echoes. They sound loud in the quiet, but they don't control where you're going. They don't erase the fact that you survived them. They don't cancel the future you haven't lived yet. If it hurts, that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you felt deeply. It means something mattered to you. And caring isn't something to be ashamed of even when it leaves scars. So breathe. Let the night pass. You won't always feel like this, and one day the quiet won't feel so heavy anymore. There's a certain kind of loneliness that only shows up at night. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from remembering when you weren't, when someone used to be a constant, a voice you could reach for without thinking, a presence that made the quiet feel safe instead of heavy. At night you realize how much space they used to fill. Now that space just exists, unoccupied, untouched. You don't want to fill it with anyone else because it doesn't feel right yet. So you sit with it, even though it aches. Your mind starts drifting into the what-ifs. What if I had said things differently? What if I stayed quiet instead of reacting? What if I left sooner? What if I tried harder? You run through 100 alternate endings, knowing none of them change reality, but somehow your brain keeps trying anyway. That's the trap of nighttime thinking. It convinces you that if you replay the past enough times, you'll finally find peace in it. But peace doesn't live there anymore. All that's left are lessons and memories, and sometimes even those feel too loud. You start feeling behind in life, like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck unpacking things you never asked to carry. You scroll through your phone, watching people live, love, laugh, post highlights, and you wonder why your heart feels so heavy when everyone else seems fine. But comparison at night is dangerous. You're seeing everyone else's daylight while you're stuck in your midnight, and that will always feel unfair. What you don't see is how many people are lying awake just like you, staring at ceilings, replaying moments, trying to make peace with things that didn't turn out the way they hoped. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're processing, you're grieving, you're letting go in real time, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. And slowly, very slowly, these nights will change. They won't disappear, but they won't crush you either. The memories will still come, but they won't steal your breath. The quiet will start feeling less empty and more calm. You won't always feel haunted by the past. One night, you'll realize you're thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday. Eventually, you start noticing that the nights don't hit the same every time. Some nights still hurt, yeah, but other nights feel quieter in a different way. Not empty, just still. And that's when you realize something is slowly shifting inside you, even if you didn't notice it during the day. You begin to understand that missing someone doesn't always mean you want them back. Sometimes it just means they were part of a chapter that mattered. A chapter that shaped you. And endings like that don't disappear quietly. They linger, they echo, not because you're stuck, but because you lived it fully. At night, you start reflecting less on them and more on yourself, on how much you've changed since then, on how certain things you tolerated before you'd never accept now, on how some versions of you had to break so newer ones could exist. And that realization is bittersweet, because growth often comes wrapped in loss. You realize that the pain isn't pointless. It taught you boundaries. It taught you what effort looks like when it's real. It taught you how to spot the difference between attention and intention. Those lessons didn't come cheap. They weren't wasted either. There are still moments when the past creeps in unannounced, and a random thought tightens your chest for a second. But now, you don't spiral the way you used to. You acknowledge it, let it pass. You don't punish yourself for remembering. You don't shame yourself for caring, and that's progress. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? You start asking, what did this teach me? And that question changes everything. The nights don't feel like battles anymore. They feel like checkpoints. Moments where you check in with yourself, where you realize how far you've come even if you still have a long way to go. And one day, you'll lie in bed and realize your thoughts aren't pulling you backward anymore. They're just passing through. And for the first time in a while, the quiet won't feel heavy. It'll feel earned. There's a point where the night stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like a mirror. Not one that judges you, but one that shows you who you've become. You're not the same person you were back then. You don't react the same. You don't attach the same. You don't give pieces of yourself away as easily. And while part of you misses that softness, another part of you is grateful. You learned how to protect it. You start realizing that healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up all at once. It happens in quiet moments like this, when you choose not to spiral, when you choose not to reach out, when you choose to sit with your feelings instead of running from them. Those small decisions stack up, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. Some nights you'll still feel that ache, that sense of loss, but it won't feel like panic anymore. It'll feel like a reminder that you loved something real, reminder that you're capable of depth. And instead of breaking you, that thought will start to ground you. You'll also start noticing how much space you've created. Space in your mind, space in your heart, space in your life. At first, that space felt terrifying, like something was missing. Now it starts to feel like potential, like room for something healthier, something calmer, something that doesn't require you to lose sleep just to feel secure. You begin trusting yourself again, trusting that you can handle whatever comes next, trusting that even if something ends, you won't fall apart the way you once did. You've already proven that to yourself night after night just by getting through. And that's the part people don't see. They don't see the growth that happens in silence. They don't see the strength it takes to sit with your thoughts and still choose to move forward. But you know, and that's enough. The night won't always feel like this. One day it'll just be night. No wait, no replay, just rest. At some point, you stop fighting the memories when they show up. You don't chase them, but you don't shove them away either. You let them pass through like background noise instead of letting them take over the whole room. That's when you realize you're not healing by force anymore. You're healing by acceptance. You accept that some nights will still feel heavier than others, that certain dates, certain places, certain songs will still stir something inside you. But now, those moments don't define your entire mood. Don't steal the whole night. They're just moments, and moments pass. You also start understanding that the past isn't trying to pull you back, just reminding you that you lived, that you felt something real, that you weren't numb, and there's something powerful about that, because numbness is easy. Feeling is brave. You stop asking yourself if you'll ever fully move on. That question slowly loses importance. Instead, you start asking, am I okay right now? And most nights, the answer becomes yes. Not perfect, not amazing, but okay. And that's enough. You notice how your thoughts begin drifting toward things ahead of you. Plans, goals, small things you're looking forward to. First, it surprises you. Like, when did my mind start doing this? But that's how healing works. It sneaks up on you, one quiet night at a time. And even when the past visits, it doesn't feel like a threat anymore. It feels like a chapter you've already read, one that mattered, one that changed you, but not one you need to reread every night to understand. You're learning how to rest without carrying everything with you, how to sleep without replaying endings, how to let the present exist without being overshadowed by what's already gone, and that's progress. Whether you recognize it yet or not, there's a quiet confidence that starts forming in you after all those nights. It doesn't come from feeling happy all the time. It comes from knowing you can sit with discomfort and still be okay. You've already faced the worst parts of your thoughts in the dark, and they didn't destroy you. That realization changes how you move through life. You stop being afraid of the quiet. Silence doesn't feel like abandonment anymore. It feels neutral, sometimes even comforting. You don't need constant noise or validation to feel grounded. You've learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. And that's something a lot of people never figure out. You also become more honest with yourself about what you want, about what you won't tolerate again, about the kind of connections you deserve. The nights taught you that chasing what's gone only keeps you stuck, and protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. And when you think back on the people you missed, the pain isn't as sharp. There's still tenderness there, but it's softer now, less like a wound and more like a scar. Proof that something happened, but also proof that it healed. You start trusting that life doesn't end with one loss, that the world doesn't stop because something did. You realize that endings don't erase everything that came before them, and they don't block everything that comes after. They just redirect you. And one night, without any dramatic moment, you'll notice something small but important. You're tired in a normal way, not emotionally drained, not overwhelmed, just ready to rest. And as you close your eyes, you won't feel haunted, you'll feel present. And then one night, it doesn't hurt anymore. Not in the way it used to. You still remember, but the memories don't grip your chest. They don't steal your breath. They don't pull you backwards. They just exist quietly like old photographs stored away instead of wounds left open. You realize you didn't get over it all at once. You outgrew it slowly, night by night, thought by thought. You kept living even when it was hard. You kept choosing yourself even when part of you wanted to stay stuck in what was familiar. And without noticing, you built something stronger than closure. You built resilience. The nights that once felt unbearable became lessons. They taught you how to sit with yourself, how to listen instead of run, how to accept endings without needing them to make sense. And because of that, you're not afraid of feeling anymore. You're not afraid of caring. You're not afraid of loving again when the time is right. You understand now that pain doesn't mean you failed. It means you were present. It means you opened your heart in a world that doesn't always know how to hold it gently. And that's not something to regret, that's something to respect. Past no longer defines you, it informs you, it shaped you, but it doesn't own you. You carry it with wisdom now, not weight. In the quiet you once feared, it's become peace. So if tonight feels heavy, remember this. You won't always feel like this. You are moving forward even when it doesn't feel obvious. And one day you'll look back at these nights and realize they didn't break you. They built you. I don't care how corny it sounds. I'll never stop being a lover boy. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there is no one else, no distractions, no half interest. Just one person in a world that feels smaller because of it. I want that kind of love where it doesn't wander, where nobody else even registers, where loving them feels natural, not forced. The kind of love that feels cinematic without trying. Just two people driving nowhere, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around acting indifferent to that. Love is something casual, like it doesn't matter, because love is everything. Sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, knowing their moods, understanding them in ways nobody else does. Going from strangers to someone you can't imagine life without, there's nothing like it. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it, because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the heartbreak, I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the risk. The lover boy in me isn't dying, it can't. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply. It's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is embarrassing, like wanting someone fully is something you should hide. They call it nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to act like I wouldn't be crushed if I lost someone I care about. I want to feel it. I want the kind of love where my heart is all the way in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah, that makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered, because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. But I am. And I'm not going to dull that part of me just to fit into a world that treats love like it's optional. Loving this way hurts more because you don't do it halfway. You don't keep one foot out the door. You don't love with conditions. You don't calculate how much to give. When you fall completely. And that means when things don't work out, it hits harder. You don't just lose a person, you lose the future you already imagined, the places you pictured going together, the version of yourself that only existed with them. People say, don't get your hopes up, protect your care less, but that's never been you. You don't know how to want someone quietly, you don't know how to love without meaning it, and you don't want to learn, because even when it hurts, loving deeply still feels better than pretending you don't care. Yeah, heartbreak changes you. It slows you down, makes you cautious for a while, but it never kills that part of you that believes in something more. And that's the difference. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because that's who you are. And even when it costs you, you'd rather feel everything than live a life that feels empty. The truth is, you already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back, and still you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection, you're chasing connection. The kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. The kind that turns ordinary moments into memories. The kind that makes you feel seen in ways words can't explain. People say love like that is unrealistic, that it only exists in movies or stories, but you've felt glimpses of it, enough to know it's real, and once you've felt that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you face it and still choose love anyway. When you say you want that kind of love, you're not talking about perfection, you're not chasing fantasy or some unrealistic fairy tale ending, you're talking about presence, the kind of love where you don't feel alone even when you're silent, where being together feels natural, not forced, where effort doesn't feel like work. Is waking up and knowing there's one person in the world who chooses you without hesitation, not because they have to, but because they want to. It's traveling with no plan and still feeling grounded, standing in open spaces and realizing the world feels fuller just because they're next to you. It's loyalty without fear, commitment without control, love that feels intense but never unsafe. That's the kind of love you want. Not obsession, not possession, connection. The kind where you don't question intentions, you don't wonder where you stand, you don't compete with distractions, you're just there, fully, openly chosen, and wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. Waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept less than what they feel. They grow distant, they grow quiet, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you don't want that. You don't want a love that feels convenient. You don't want someone who chooses you only when it's easy. You want someone who stays when it's real, when it's messy, when it requires effort. So you wait, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you love, you know how much you give, and you know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. You'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone who doesn't meet you where you stand. And yeah, some days it gets heavy, watching people pair off, watching others settle into relationships that look fine on the surface, but deep down, you're not jealous. You're patient, because you're not searching for company. You're waiting for alignment, for someone who doesn't flinch at your intensity, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't treat your loyalty like it's replaceable. You're waiting for someone who wants the same kind of love you do. All in, no exits, and until that shows up, you're not lowering your standards, you're protecting your heart. If it ever happens, when someone finally matches your energy, you'll feel the difference immediately. Not fireworks, not chaos, not anxiety disguised as excitement, clarity. You won't question where you stand. You won't wonder if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. It'll feel mutual in a way you're not used to. They won't flinch at your intensity. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't act overwhelmed by the way you love. They'll meet it. Your effort won't scare them. It'll reassure them. Your loyalty won't feel rare. It'll feel natural. And the craziest part, you won't feel like you're chasing anything. No convincing. No proving, no waiting for them to catch up emotionally. They'll already be there. And suddenly, all that waiting makes sense. All the times you didn't settle, all the times you walked away, all the times you chose being alone over being half-loved. You'll realize you weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. When someone finally loves you the way you've always loved others, it won't feel overwhelming. It'll feel right. At the end of everything, after the waiting, the heartbreak, the disappointment, the almost, one thing never leaves: your capacity to love. You don't lose it, even when people try to convince you that you should, even when the world rewards detachment, even when acting unbothered looks easier, even when caring deeply costs you more than you expected, because loving fully was never a phase for you. It's part of who you are. You were built to feel things deeply, to choose one person and mean it, to love in a way that's intentional, loyal, and complete. And yeah, that makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you real. The lover boy in you survives every heartbreak, not because you forget the pain, but because you decide it's not stronger than your heart. You don't regret loving, you don't regret believing, you don't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your intensity. They won't treat your love like it's extra. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it. And when that happens, everything you held on to will make sense. So no, the lover boy in you doesn't die. He just waits. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready.